Chapter 76. A gigantic purplish-black circular magic array instantly spread out on the ground. There were profound and complex patterns on the magic array that were never seen before, enough to make anyone feel dizzy just by looking at them. These patterns proved how powerful this magic array was. Huh! Jilin only made a sound of confusion before he was engulfed by the endless darkness that surged out from the magic array. It was the deepest darkness. The Pope and the others only looked at it for a short while, and felt as if their souls were being sucked in. They did not dare to imagine if they would be able to escape if they were trapped in it. The Pope looked at the darkness in front of him, and could not help but frown. He did not expect Aisha to have such a thing. Although he and Aisha had made this thing together, they had only managed to make one after much effort. Hence, he and Aisha had not seen its effects with their own eyes. Now it seemed that he had underestimated the effort he had put in when he thought that this thing would only be able to trap him for 2 hours. Thinking of this, the Pope could not help but look at the dead lord. He thought to himself, if you could see this scene, you would probably say that it was fortunate that we defeated the witches, and then advise me to stay away from Aisha. Why are you still here? Are you waiting for death? Aisha appeared beside the Pope without warning and said coldly. Aisha? Musin exclaimed. Aisha was worthy of being a witch who had roamed the continent for more than 100 years. She had seen all kinds of storms. Even in such a critical situation, she didn't forget to maintain her poise. She showed a polite smile to everyone as a greeting. I never thought that the evilest witch on the continent would have such a close relationship with the Pope, the Sword Saint said. Is this the time to care about such things? Aisha was angry. Get out of here. Boom. Following a loud explosion, a beam of light shot out from the crystal labyrinth, and the endless darkness was torn apart. Along with the magic array, it disappeared into thin air. It's over. This might be your last chance. You've wasted it just like that, Aisha said to the Pope. It's fine, I wasn't planning to leave anyway, the Pope spat. Aisha. Jilin looked at her in confusion. I'm not surprised that Staya is on the side of the humans, but what are you doing? Aisha did not answer him. Instead, she asked, this spell is called Dark Crystal Labyrinth. You are the only creature that has experienced it. How do you feel? Jilin remained silent for a while. Then, he lowered his head and took a deep look at Aisha before saying, It's okay. There's no light in that space at all. Everything is swallowed by darkness. There's no up or down, no left or right. It's like another world, a world of chaos. For humans, it's a pretty good spell. Then why can't it trap you? Aisha narrowed her long and narrow eyes and smiled maliciously. Of course. After all, I'm a noble dragon who can cross the realm wall by myself. Although your spell is pretty good, it's still too weak for me. I can break it with brute force, Jilin said matter-of-factly. You should know. Don't tell me you still want to trap me? Oh, a dragon? Noble? Aisha said. You have a problem with that? Jilin asked. That's not true, Aisha said. You're such a noble and holy megalosaurus. You won't break your promise, right? What promise? Jilin asked. Aisha grabbed the Pope's collar and pulled him in front of her. You promised me that you won't kill this person. Musin, Sword Saint, and the others immediately looked at the Pope with ambiguous gazes. Ugh, keep a low profile. You're making it sound like I'm your spy. I'm the Pope, the Pope said. Aisha glanced at him speechlessly. She was starting to doubt the need for her to stand in front of Jilin. She could tell that the people present, including the Pope, were already indifferent to life and death. Each of them was a superior person. Their state of mind was sufficient, and they understood life and death quite well. In addition, they were all mentally prepared to succeed or die trying when it came to the crusade against the Red Disaster. Now that he had failed, it was time to die for a righteous cause. Oh, Jilin thought about it seriously. That's right. There was such a thing. Then what did you want to do just now? Aisha was furious. Didn't you say that the dragon race would never break their promise? That's right, Jilin said without hesitation. However, when I made the promise to you and Staya, I used the dragon race's true name, aka Gyudel. Naturally, I wouldn't break it, but this oath of yours, I made it as Qi Lin's human identity. So you can break your promise. Aisha was shocked. Isn't that so? Jilin was confused. Aren't all humans like this? What's the use of an oath? If you don't break your promise, then it's meaningless. Who taught you that? Aisha asked curiously. Humans also attach great importance to oaths. There were only a few people who could teach Jilin this kind of thing. The profession of a witch unexpectedly attached great importance to promises, so it couldn't be Aisha. Staya was even more so. How could a noble knight break her promise? Sure enough, Jilin stretched out his sharp finger and pointed at the third party present, the neutral Bane. At this moment, this grade 2 little thief focused everyone's attention. The Megalosaurus, the legendary powerhouse, the princess, the Pope. I just said it casually, Bane said innocently. Not only his voice, but his legs were also trembling. I think he's right, Jilin said. Humans invented oaths, which means that humans have discovered the cunning and treachery of their own kind. And from human history, the more you need to make an agreement, the more unreliable it is. So, how can you believe the oaths of humans? Why should you take them seriously? Aisha stared at Bane painfully. She didn't know what this guy said to Jilin, so she could only say helplessly, Then how about you give me some face? No. Jilin said decisively. He pointed his sword at Sword Saint and said, This person cut off one of my hands. You know the rules of the dragon race. Your hands? Aisha looked at Jilin's hands. No, they're quite good. Jilin thought for a while and felt that there was no need to be long-winded with Aisha, so he directly stabbed down with his sword. Guy Minghui saw the situation and directly held the virtual sword against Jilin's huge sword. She went against the sky, as if she wanted to fight against Jilin. With such a huge sword that could cut through the earth and mountains, even if Sword Saint's flowing light sword didn't break, he would still die. Now that Sword Saint was holding the virtual sword, it could be said that he was going to die. Aisha saw the situation and smiled proudly. She waved her hand and a purple light flashed on Sword Saint's body. When the light disappeared, the Sword Saint also disappeared. Aisha. Jilin's voice was like the cold wind from hell that blew across ice. It seems that talking too much is not a problem of humans. Thanks to you, I was able to complete this magic circle, Aisha said. I didn't expect that the Holy Grimoire of Light and the Holy Grimoire of Darkness would work together one day. Staya said in a low voice. As soon as she said that, 2 books and a huge magic circle appeared above their head. The 2 Holy Grimoires were both open. The teleportation magic circle recorded in the Holy Grimoire of Darkness. The light distortion magic recorded in the Holy Grimoire of Light. I learned it from you guys, Jilin said angrily. Aisha, are you really going to stop me? What about your plan to take revenge on humans? You can kill everyone except this one. Aisha pointed at the Pope and said firmly. Ha! The Pope smiled and wanted to say something, then Aisha waved her hand again. The Pope, Iron Blood King, Musin, Duke, all disappeared. Finally, only Jilin, Aisha, Staya and Bane were left in the city. Jilin looked at Aisha and Staya and was silent. The atmosphere between the 3 of them was very cold. It was even colder than the temperature of the snow in the Snow Wind Empire. We're done here, right? Can we go now? The wind is quite strong and the weather is quite cold, Bane said softly. Yes. Let's go. Golden eyes and red hair. Jilin, who had turned back into his human form, stood in front of Aisha and said coldly, Winter Snow Chapter, finished. Chapter 77. Light Calendar, February 14, 201. The Snow Wind Empire officially broke off relations with the Dwarf Kingdom, and their army pressed in. The Dwarf Kingdom would rather die than submit, and used the power of the entire kingdom to fight back, and started a war in the Snow-Fire Plains. The war was extremely tragic, and blood flowed like a river. Then, the Red Disaster suddenly descended and attacked the human camp. The human legends all came out, and the Church of Light and the Snow Wind Empire helped to fight the Red Disaster together. Unfortunately, they lost. The Snow Wind Empire suffered heavy casualties, and the Church of Light's Pope, Lord, died. The Legend Powerhouse and the Iron Blood King were lucky to escape, but their vitality was greatly damaged. Then, the entire Dwarf Kingdom joined the Red Disaster camp. The Red Disaster and the Dwarf Kingdom disappeared. Light Calendar west of the Saimai Empire. Mount Gerta, Red Dragon Palace. Can we really stay here? The Dwarf King asked with a trembling voice. The Dwarf King couldn't be blamed for being so excited. A mature underground volcano like the Red Dragon Palace was too suitable for the dwarf race to live. And compared to before, it was far away from the complicated and dangerous human society. The Dwarf King thought that as long as he could live on this land and build a good relationship with Jilin, the dwarf race would be able to continue for generations. This was every Dwarf King's greatest wish, apart from forging a divine artifact. Jilin was lying comfortably on a huge mountain of treasures, gold coins, gems, swords, everything. This mountain of treasures was actually able to support Jilin's gigantic body. One could only imagine how enormous of a treasure this was. Jilin didn't want to move at all. He only felt a sense of satisfaction from the depths of his soul. This was the instinct of the dragon race. Hearing the Dwarf King's question, Jilin said without even opening his eyes, "I said that this place is suitable for you. What do you think about moving the Dwarf Kingdom here?" "I think it's very good," the Dwarf King said. "But please don't forget our previous agreement. Although the strength of the dwarves is not worth mentioning compared to you, we still have a backbone. I know, you have also forged a suitable weapon for me, so I won't harm you." Here, the dwarves were absolutely free. As long as they felt that it was inappropriate, they could leave at any time. "I swear in the name of Ikagudel," Jilin said indifferently without lifting his eyelids. When he heard the name, Ikagudel, the Dwarf King froze for a moment. He didn't understand what it meant until he saw Aisha nodding gently. He knew that this matter was safe. "Thank you." The Dwarf King didn't say anything else. "No need. This is a collaboration," Jilin said. "Also, you can excavate and build whatever you want under this volcano. I won't interfere." "Batel, is there a problem?" "No, my lord." Upon hearing Jilin's question, Batel, who had been standing quietly to the side, answered without any hesitation. "All right then. Have your subordinates help the dwarves build a large underground city. Listen to the dwarves' arrangements. Look at the castle you said you would build for me. What the hell is this? You're bullying me for not seeing the world," Jilin said. "Yes, my lord," Batel responded. Batel felt that his lord had changed a lot after going out once. Obviously, he didn't talk much before. Moreover, it was already very rare for a group of natural elementals with little spiritual intelligence to build the Red Dragon Palace to this point. From this moment on, the originally very quiet Red Dragon Palace began to ring with the sound of chiseling stones and the sound of machines running for a long time. Jilin listened to these sounds with his eyes closed, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but evoke a smile. It is said that the greatest advantage of humans over other life forms is that they are good at making and using tools. So, when the monsters in the eyes of humans pick up better weapons than humans and face them, what advantage will humans have? At that time, what will be the difference between humans and monsters? Humans, can you show me the answer? Interesting. Snow Wind Empire, Snow Moon City. This disappears. The other side grows. The Iron Blood King sighed as he sat on his throne. In front of him stood all the ministers with real power in the Snow Wind Empire. "Your Majesty is right. According to the news from the Saimai Empire, the Gerta volcano to the west of the Saimai Empire has an endless amount of elemental demons. They've always followed the Red Calamity's lead and are a great threat to us humans. Now that the Dwarf Kingdom has joined the Red Calamity's forces, it's not enough to describe how powerful they are. From now on, we'll probably have to face a bunch of monsters with excellent equipment. Now that things have reached this point, we must plan for the long term. A minister said. Yes, that's right. The Snow Wind Empire had stood in the north for many years and had never suffered such a crushing defeat. These ministers were clearly panicking. Your Majesty, Chief Secretary Bello said. As the Chief Secretary for many years, Bello's prestige in the Snow Wind Empire's court had already reached a level where it was like the sun in the sky. When the Chief Secretary spoke, the entire hall instantly quieted down. A monster with excellent equipment? Although this is a problem, it is not worth mentioning compared to the Red Calamity. No matter how much the human race changes internally, we have always stood at the peak of the world, at the center of the world. Hence, when looking at the human world as a whole, there is not a single day of peace. We face all sorts of challenges at all times. To the west of the Saimai Empire is an endless stretch of volcanoes with elemental demons that have been nurtured since ancient times. Even with the help of the Church of Light, the Saimai Empire can only protect itself. To the east of the Divine Dragon Empire is the sea race of the Boundless Sea. They live at the bottom of the sea and occupy the geographical advantage. Humans can only passively take a beating, unable to take the initiative to attack. Only the Divine Dragon Empire, which has the help of the dragon race, can contend with the sea race. To the south of the Nanshin Empire are the vast beastmen and countless wild beasts. They attack humans all year round. Only the Nanshin Empire's warlike races, who can use secret techniques to obtain the power of ferocious beasts and strengthen their weapons, can fight the beastmen to a standstill. I won't talk about the situation to the north of the Snow Wind Empire. I believe everyone knows about it. The Middle Empire is the most mysterious place. However, the dangers it hides make anyone who smells it tremble in fear. Therefore, humans living in this world had always been plagued with misfortune. We don't fear it because we are used to it. However, the Red Disaster is different. Its strength surpasses what humans can endure. Thus, our focus is still on the Red Disaster. As for the others, we can put them aside for now. That's right, the Iron Blood King said. But how are we going to defeat the Red Disaster? The Duke asked. Even legendary experts can't do anything. You should know how much effort we put in and how much we lost. It was all for nothing. No, it wasn't for nothing. At the very least, we know that the mobile cities aren't enough to defeat the Red Disaster. However, the bright snow divine weapon can indeed injure him, Chief Aide Bei Luo said. You call that injuring him? Don't use the methods of politicians to whitewash it, the Duke said angrily. That's insignificant. But it's better than nothing, Chief Aide Bei Luo said calmly. We managed to decipher a lot of the information about the era of gods from the stone steel dugout from Morag. Could it be that there's a way to slay a dragon in the new information? The Duke asked expectantly. Of course not. The newly deciphered information says that humans have indeed relied on the bright snow divine weapon to defeat the god. However, the number of weapons used is 10,000. Bei Luo said. If we want to use a single bright snow divine weapon to defeat the Red Disaster, we're wrong from the start. What? The Duke was shocked. We've only created a single bright snow divine weapon, yet we've used up countless resources of the Empire, and this was with the help of the Church of Light. Now we actually need 10,000. This is using the power of humans to slay gods. The price to succeed is naturally extraordinary. Being able to see a glimmer of hope is already good enough. Bei Luo said. So, there are a few points. First, notify the Saimai Empire to change the mobile cities plans. The enemy is far stronger than we imagined. Second, begin mass production of bright snow divine weapons. With a successful start, the cost will greatly decrease. At the same time, adjust the policies and resources to lean towards this side. Third, continue to explore Morag and try to find the location of the battlefield during the era of gods. I don't believe that with so many divine weapons back then, there aren't even a few hundred left. Fourth, notify the other empires that the fate of humans is unprecedentedly grim. What do you think, Your Majesty? The Iron Blood King frowned and remained silent for a long time before finally saying a word. Good. Saimai Empire, Xingming City. The Xingming King stood between the mobile city's construction site and the Xingming City's restoration site, holding a golden piece of paper in his hand. It was a special communication letter between human emperors. Have we failed? Stia, Xingming King, Your Majesty. The Pope appeared beside him. I'm ashamed to have let you down. You've already said that. Other than feeling a little down, the Xingming King did not react too emotionally. If I told you that I'm not surprised by this failure, would you believe me? Yes, the Pope said after some thought. Those who haven't seen the power of the Red Disaster with their own eyes can't imagine it. The Xingming King smiled bitterly and helplessly as he handed the golden letter to the Pope. This is the mobile city's renovation plan from the Snow Wind Empire. Take a look. The Pope took the letter and could not help but open his mouth after a few glances. I'm afraid that this plan will require the full strength of the human race to succeed. Why, you think it's exaggerated too? The Xingming King said. The Pope thought for a while and said, combined with the enemy's strength, I think it's a little reliable. Thanks to your failure this time, the other three fellows also think so, the Xingming King said. You've been away for many years, the church must have been out of control. How are things now? Everything is under control, the Pope said. As expected of you. The Xingming King seemed to have expected this. However, forcefully seizing the power of the church, this is probably not your original intention. I had no choice. Chapter 78. Ha! The Xingming King chuckled. Is this what the people of Jianghu always say? You have no choice in Jianghu? Stop joking. No matter what, I am the Pope of the Church of Light. How can I be like a gangster in Jianghu? The Pope scoffed. I can't say that I have no choice, because this is my own choice. In this life, people will always force themselves to do things they don't want to do for various reasons. And they will do it willingly and without hesitation. The Xingming King's eyelids twitched when he heard this. You? What's wrong? Why are you speaking so seriously? You've never been like this before. As the Pope, I have a heavy responsibility, but I rarely manage the affairs of the church these years. I do things casually because there is someone else who does it for me. But now that that person is dead, I still want to avenge him. So, I can only be serious myself. Sigh. Thinking about Lord's sacrifice, even the Xingming King couldn't help but feel sad. He sighed. What are the chances of winning the next time we fight? The Xingming King asked. It's hard to say. This time, we still don't know how deep the water is. The only thing we understand is how weak and naive we humans are, the Pope said. But, I found something interesting in the Church's taboo scriptures. The Xingming King, who had been frowning, suddenly brightened. But then he frowned and looked at the Pope. The Church of Light has taboo scriptures? What are they about? The Pope was very surprised. He looked at the Xingming King strangely and said, You really don't know? I've never heard of it. Then pretend I didn't say anything. Do you think it's possible? Middle Empire, Capital Palace. Your Majesty! A hurried shout rang through the palace. How dare you? Who is making such a ruckus here? This is the forbidden area of the palace. The golden-armored guard guarding the entrance of the palace shouted. Oh, it's Commanderly. The front line has a report. It's urgent. Please don't be offended. Let me see His Majesty quickly. Oh, it's Master Wei. I was wondering who it was. What was it that made Milord so flustered? How could he make such a big fuss? His Majesty is still worried about what happened a few days ago. Sir, please be careful and don't alarm His Majesty. Commander Li said. Thank you for your advice, Commander. Let me see His Majesty quickly. Lord Wei was so anxious that he was about to cry. All right, go in. Seeing Lord Wei's anxious expression, Commander Li couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. Just by looking at the yellow envelope in your hand, I can tell that it's not a big deal. Why are you panicking? A few days ago, a nameless soldier held a red letter high in his hand and rode a horse straight into the palace. He made a lot of noise along the way, and in the end, he even trampled the Wuji Palace. Not to mention a mere guard commander like himself, even if it was those old ancestors in the palace, who would dare to stop him? Who dared to make a sound? Commander Li secretly despised Lord Wei for making a mountain out of a molehill. This humble subject pays his respects to His Majesty. Ah, Prime Minister is also here. This humble subject pays his respects to the Prime Minister. Lord Wei knelt on the ground and said, in the Wuji Palace there was a person wearing a golden dragon robe. He was naturally the Emperor of the Middle Empire, the Golden King. Below him sat another person. It was the Middle Empire's Prime Minister, Zhuge Zhang. It was obvious that the Emperor was talking to the Prime Minister about something. Oh, it's Minister Wei. Why are you so flustered? The Golden King asked. Reporting to His Majesty, something bad has happened. The 16th Prince has rebelled. He is now leading an army to attack. Lord Wei said with a trembling voice. The palace was dead silent. Lord Wei felt that his back was drenched in cold sweat. He nervously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. No one dared to guess the Emperor's current mood. After all, he was betrayed by his own son. How heartbroken and angry must he be? It was not surprising that the furious Emperor would do something crazy, for example, implicating the innocent, and no matter how you looked at it, you seemed to be the most suitable candidate. The Emperor was stunned. He turned his head to look at Prime Minister Zhuge. 16th, what was his name again? Lu? Your Majesty, Li Lu is the 8th Prince. He is standing outside the door. The Prime Minister said. Then it must be Li Su. Your Majesty, Li Su is the 11th Prince. The Prime Minister said helplessly. The 16th Prince's name is Li Wunderwan. Wunderwan. This name was given by me? Why don't I have any recollection of it? And why are the other princes' names only one word? Why is he the only one with 2 words? What was I thinking at that time? The Emperor really couldn't remember anything. He was very puzzled. Your Majesty, this name was given by me. The Prime Minister said. Besides, Your Majesty didn't specifically say that the princes could only have 1 word in their names. How dare you? The Emperor said. Naming a prince is something a subject like you can do? Moreover, as the Prime Minister, do you do this kind of thing? This subject wasn't the Prime Minister 10 years ago. At that time, this subject was the Minister of Rights and the steward of the Imperial Clan Court. It is appropriate for this subject to name a prince, the Prime Minister said. Hearing the Prime Minister say this, the Emperor was a bit uncertain. Thus, he looked at an old eunuch behind him. Your Majesty, what the Prime Minister said is very true. The old eunuch said softly. The eunuch's sharp voice was very pleasant to the ears. The Emperor accepted. 16th, what have you been doing these years? 4 years ago, on Your Majesty's orders, he was the Commander-in-Chief of the Left Guard Battalion. The Prime Minister said. It's a real position, and he has soldiers under him. The Emperor thought, but the Left Guard Battalion only has 3,600 people. With so few people, he dared to rebel? After all, he is a descendant of the imperial family. He has the temperament and courage. He was probably instigated by someone. The Prime Minister took a sip of tea and said. Then he is stupid. The Emperor said. Perhaps he has other backup plans or hidden forces. the Emperor said with a bit of expectation. Your Majesty worries too much, the Prime Minister said lightly. You old man, don't underestimate my child. The Emperor was obviously not convinced. Lord Wei was already in a complete mess. It was clearly a prince's rebellion, but the Emperor and the Prime Minister seemed to think it wasn't worth mentioning. There was no need to make a fuss about it. The difference was that the Prime Minister, who could name the prince, thought that 16th Prince's rebellion was completely instigated by someone else. There was no need to pay attention to such a person who didn't have his own opinions. The Emperor, who couldn't remember his son's name, was angered by the Prime Minister's belittling attitude. Now, it seemed that he really wanted his 16th son to break into the palace and kill his way into the main hall so that he could gain some face. Greetings, Imperial Father. Greetings, Prime Minister. Commander Li walked into the hall and bowed. 8th Prince, you are too courteous. The Prime Minister stood up and returned the greeting. How is it? Where is 16th Prince now? The Emperor asked anxiously. Imperial Father, 16th brother, had just arrived at the palace gates when he was subdued by the Left Guard Battalion's deputy commander, General Luo. He is now tied up at the palace gates, waiting for your Majesty to deal with him. Please do not worry, Imperial Father, Li Lu said. He can't even subdue his own subordinates. The Prime Minister sighed. It was as if he expected better from 16th Prince. The Emperor's face turned green with anger. Idiot, trash, how did my imperial family produce such a thing? Li Lu was confused, but he still asked, Imperial Father, what about 16th brother? Should we bring him here? Bring what? This kind of trash, he is a disgrace to my Li family. He is too low class. Tell him to scram as far as possible, the Emperor said angrily. May I ask, Imperial Father, where should we send 16th brother? Li Lu asked. Where should we send him? Send him to Luo River. If Luo River can't be repaired, don't come back. The Emperor said. Luo River? Imperial Father, please reconsider. Li Lu begged on his knees. Scram. Yes, haha, the Prime Minister couldn't help but chuckle in his heart. Luo River. The Luo River almost traversed the Middle Empire. It had a long basin and countless tributaries. In the Middle Empire's water conservancy, it had always been one of the most important parts. It fed countless citizens of the Middle Empire and was called the Mother River by the people. Unfortunately, everything had its pros and cons. The Luo River's floods had never stopped since ancient times, and many people had died from them as well. If the Luo River could be managed, the Middle Empire would have countless fertile fields. It wouldn't be a problem to double the grain production. This matter, he always thought about it when he was dreaming. It seemed that he wouldn't be able to see 16th Prince again in this life. Then, this humble subject will take his leave. Lord Wei felt that there was no need for him to stay here. He had only knelt here for a while and the rebellion had already been quelled. Lord Wei, you did well this time. I'll leave the Left Guard camp and Luo Yu's rewards to you. The Emperor said. This humble subject accepts the decree. This humble subject will take his leave. Lord Wei left the hall. When he passed by Li Lu, he couldn't help but shake his head. He thought that the Emperor was too much. He could remember a vice-commander's name, but couldn't remember his own son's. Prime Minister, you must be joking. The Emperor calmed himself down and smiled. Your Majesty, you must be joking. This humble subject is already used to it. This could be considered a tradition unique to our country's royal family. Although 16th Prince's methods weren't as good, the general direction was right. Prime Minister said. What do you mean? The Emperor felt that Prime Minister was implying something. Haha, nothing. Prime Minister smiled. Let's continue talking about the previous matter. What's there to talk about? Who would have thought that guy Mingyue would break the sword of flowing light when he went out? And he went into seclusion as soon as he came back. Really, doesn't he know that the sword of flowing light is the core of the great Qian Kuan array? This concerns the country. How could he so easily? The emperor didn't know what to say. Your Majesty, don't worry. This humble subject has a plan, Zhuge Zhang said. Chapter 79. Red Dragon Palace. The clanking sounds reverberated in this huge underground cavern, as if they would never stop. It was deafening and irritating. Luckily, there were only 2.5 humans in the entire Mount Gerda. The dwarfs ignored the sound due to their long years of forging and their natural talents. If the environment was quieter, some of the older dwarfs would not be able to sleep. According to Qi Lin's words, this was probably similar to a profession called student in the human category. Once they heard someone standing on the platform talking, they would feel sleepy. Then, once no one spoke, they would really be unable to fall asleep. This was the powerful power of habit. As for the elemental creatures, they could easily adjust their hearing system, as they used the natural elements to obtain information from the outside world. Ah! A hysterical scream drowned out the roaring sounds of the machines, although it was only for a short moment. What are you shouting for? Aisha rolled her eyes at Bane, who was covering his ears and screaming. Her tone was full of disdain. Ah, I can't, I'm going deaf, Bane shouted exaggeratedly. Don't worry, we've been here for so many days. If you're not deaf, then you're not deaf, Staya said confidently. Even if I'm not deaf, I think I'll have to speak loudly when I go out, Bane said. What do you want? Aisha asked with the corner of her eyes. Of course I want to go out. Why are we here every day? We can't see the sun in this place, Bane said. Don't forget, Aisha and I were not on Jilin's side in the previous battle. Why would he still bring us around? Staya said. That's true, Bane said dejectedly. Unlike Aisha and Staya, who had a complicated background, Bane sincerely treated Jilin as his partner. However, after knowing that he was not a human, he could not help but feel strange. I think you're thinking too much, Aisha said. He won't take these things to heart. Why? Staya and Bane asked at the same time. People only get angry when they are betrayed when they trust someone, Aisha said. Presumably, dragons are the same. You mean, Jilin never trusted us? Bane asked cautiously. It's not even close to that level, Aisha said. It doesn't matter to him whether we betray him or not, so he won't care at all. You're right. Staya agreed with Aisha, which was rare. Besides, Aisha continued, we betrayed him at a critical moment, so he should have been prepared for it. Why? Bane asked curiously. What's so strange about people like me betraying others? Aisha said matter-of-factly. So you do know. Bane mocked her in his mind. He took Staya out of her home, so it's natural for her to betray him, Aisha said. Ahem. Staya coughed. As a light knight, Staya felt uncomfortable when she heard the word betray. Although it was not wrong, but something was wrong. Then why did he let the two of you follow him? Bane asked. Because all humans are the same in Jilin's eyes. The three of us are still useful to Jilin, Aisha said. Is that true? Bane could not believe it. Jilin always thought that humans are a complicated, fickle, and contradictory species. There are no exceptions. Aisha said. Why? Bane asked. Jilin once said that humans are contradictory creatures. They are kind and evil, motivated and emotional at the same time. They wavered between kindness and evil all the time, struggling between rationality and sensibility all the time. Therefore, fickleness must be their greatest characteristic. So how can you trust a fickle creature? Isn't it normal to be betrayed by a fickle creature? Aisha said. Jilin also said that even his golden dragon eyes could not see through the complexity of a human's heart. If justice is white, evil is black, honesty is blue, and cunning is gray, then it's like humans have plucked all the colors in the world and put them into the lake of their heart, stirring it again and again. What appeared in the end could no longer be described by color. It was chaos. Those who pluck more bright colors, humans call them good people. Those who pluck more dark colors, humans call them bad people. But what's even more annoying is that bad people can become good people, and good people can become bad people. And the process of turning good people into bad people is unbelievably easy. Is it because dark colors can easily cover up light colors? Humans are really complicated creatures. Aisha imitated Jilin's tone. Especially the last sentence, it was perfect. It couldn't be helped, Jilin had said that sentence too many times. Staya and Bane's lips parted slightly. They were so shocked that they couldn't close their mouths. That's what a dragon should think. That's what he should say? Aisha knew what they were thinking when she saw their expressions. After all, she had thought the same thing in the past. Then why aren't we leaving? Bane was awakened by the clanking sounds. He finally remembered his initial question. This is Jilin's house. Why is he leaving? He doesn't mind the noise. Aisha said. Isn't he bored? Bane asked. Dragons can't be judged by human standards. You can't understand him. There's a saying in the Middle Empire, if you're not a fish, how can you understand the happiness of a fish? Staya said. Bane fell into deep thought. Don't listen to her bullsh *t. Aisha said. According to human legends, the dragon clan is very lazy. I know that. Bane's eyes suddenly lit up. Dragons have 3 hobbies: treasure, sleep. Bane suddenly stopped talking and secretly glanced at Staya. Go on, why did you stop? Aren't there 3 hobbies? There's still one left, Aisha said. The other one is stealing the princess. Bane lowered his head and said embarrassedly. Ha ha ha. Aisha laughed unrestrainedly. Staya's expression was as uncomfortable as if she had just eaten a mouthful of half-cooked rice. So, now that he has a treasure mountain, and the princess has it too, the biggest possibility is that he's sleeping, Aisha said. Then, how long will he sleep for? Bane asked. According to the legends, you might not be able to see him, Aisha said. Do I have to stay here for the rest of my life? Bane's eyes widened. No, I'm going to wake him up. Bane stood up and was about to leave. I advise you not to go, Staya said. Bane said. First of all, dragons usually sleep very soundly. You might not be able to wake him up with your power, Staya said. Bane fell silent, because he just remembered that Aisha had used the terrifying elemental fusion to wake Jilin up. That's true, in the human stories. There are even idiotic stories where the hero chopped off the dragon's head while it was sleeping. You can see how soundly the dragons sleep, Aisha said. Secondly, normally, other than the hero who killed the dragon, anyone who woke the dragon up would not have a good ending, Staya said. Bane gulped and walked back to sit down. Then, what about those who are not normal? Bane asked. Staya pointed at Aisha. She's the only one who woke up the Megalosaurus and is not a hero, and is not dead, Staya said. I hope you're the next one. Bane thought for a moment and stood up to leave. Staya and Aisha watched him go back to his room. Why don't you want Jilin to leave? Aisha asked. If he goes out, it's too dangerous for humans. It's like a lion in a forest where there are only rabbits, Staya said. Humans don't have the ability to protect themselves, they can only wait to be slaughtered. You guys always claim to be righteous and look high and mighty, but you're just a bunch of frightened birds, Aisha said. Maybe Jilin never thought of harming humans. It's not about whether he wants to or not, it's about whether he can. We are responsible for the lives of countless people, we can't afford to be lucky or take any risks, Staya said. As for the frightened birds you mentioned, when humans stand high, they are naturally afraid of falling, because it's very painful and they might fall to their death. They might even hit the people below, so they have to be careful and try to stand firm. Hypocrite, you're just afraid of dying, but you're still saying it so righteously, Aisha said. Whatever you say, Staya did not argue with Aisha for once. After hearing what I just said, are you still planning to influence Jilin's view of humans? Aisha asked. I'm not someone who gives up easily, Staya said. But you just said, you're not a fish. How can you know the happiness of a fish? Aisha said. I also said, he can't be judged by humans. Humans can't understand him, but he can definitely understand humans, if he's willing, and in the right way, Staya said. That doesn't sound fair to Jilin, Aisha said. How can there be fairness in this world? Staya said. Is that something a knight of light like you should say? Aisha widened her eyes. I'm also a member of the royal family, Staya said calmly. That's true, Aisha said. Then how did you become the saintess of the church? First, I'm very outstanding. Second, the Pope isn't in the sacred city most of the time. Third, I was very naive, so naive that I thought I could change the world. Staya said. No, that's not naive. That's the arrogant nature of humans. Every human should have thought that before. Jilin, who was in human form, suddenly appeared and said. Staya and Aisha suddenly stood up. When did you come? Aisha asked. Oh, I didn't come. This is an illusion I made with the fire element. In the Red Dragon Palace, I can gather the fire element and create it anywhere. It's quite convenient, Jilin said proudly. Is it another technique you learned in that battle? Staya said. Something like that, Jilin said. He waved his hand and a red map appeared in the air. Jilin pointed at a certain spot on the map. Where is this place? Aisha and Staya looked at each other. Aisha said, Middle Empire, capital city. Chapter 80. How do you know the map of the Middle Empire? Staya asked after thinking for a while. Jilin did not speak, as if there was something that was hard for him to say. Aisha and Staya were shocked by Jilin's attitude. What was going on? How could he make a megalosaurus hesitate? Why do I feel like it's dangerous? Aisha said with her arms crossed. If you don't want to answer this question, I won't force you, Staya said. Then let me change the question. Why are you asking this? Do you still need to ask? Jilin said impatiently. Based on human behavior, when a person holds a map and points to a certain location on it and asks you where this is, they will naturally want to go to this place. That's true, Aisha interrupted. But the problem is, who has ever met a megalosaurus that points at a map and asks you where is this place? Why would a dragon look at a map? You don't even walk on the ground. Does a map mean anything to you? Wait, who taught you how to look at a map? Did you teach him? Staya shook her head and shrugged, indicating that she had never taught Jilin how to look at a map. Why are you going there? Staya asked. I'll tell you later, Jilin said. Get ready. We're leaving tomorrow. After Jilin finished speaking, the clone suddenly exploded and turned into countless visible fire elements that scattered in all directions. This ability to control the fire elements is amazing. No matter how strong a human is, they can't compare to him in their entire life, Staya exclaimed as she looked at the countless fire elements that passed by them. Such dense and pure fire elements were gathered together and compressed into a human shape. It was also invisible to the naked eye. How much fire elements did he have? If he accidentally exploded, the power. Staya thought that he could easily blow up a city. How was this a clone? This was clearly a walking bomb. However, Jilin waved his hand and dispersed his clones. The elements returned to heaven and earth. Staya and Aisha were in the center of the elements, but they were safe and sound. One had to know that even a single particle of fire elemental could severely injure Aisha. As for Staya, as a knight, she might be better off. How could this not make people sigh? After all, this is their racial talent. There's no point in being envious, and there's no need to be envious, Aisha said. Humans have their own uniqueness. You can actually speak from the standpoint of a human? Did I hear that right? Staya asked curiously. That's not it. I'm just wondering how humans can defeat Jilin. Aisha said. Why do you want to defeat Jilin? I thought you didn't consider yourself a human? Staya asked. First of all, I'm just thinking about it. It doesn't mean I'll do it, Aisha said. When I see an invincible creature standing there, I can't help but want to kick him down. It must feel good. Maybe it's human nature. It's definitely not human nature, Staya said. It's just your nature. You'll understand that I'm right in the future. It's human nature, even if you won't admit it, Aisha said mysteriously. Have you thought of how to defeat Jilin? Staya felt that Aisha seemed to have foreseen something, but she remembered the habits of witches, so she didn't ask further. Not at all, Aisha answered straightforwardly. That's true, Staya said. Jilin's map is a bit special. How special? Aisha asked. The map only shows the palace of the Middle Empire, the city gates of the capital, a few main roads, rivers, and a few famous buildings. The other roads, houses, and buildings are all blank. This was not what a map should look like. If one were to look at a normal map, Jilin's map would either be an incomplete product or a useless map. But a map that Jilin remembers is definitely not a useless map. Staya said. You mean? Aisha asked. I don't understand, Staya said. Never mind then, I'll go and prepare, Aisha said. Okay. After the Battle of Snowfire, the biggest change in the team was that the relationship between Aisha and Staya had improved significantly, but what didn't change was that Aisha was still that evil witch who struck fear in people's hearts. She would never tell the complete truth to anyone. Lying had become an instinct for her. So, Aisha didn't go and prepare for a long trip like she and Staya had said. Instead, they arrived at the temporary palace that was still under construction in the Kingdom of Dwarfs through a teleportation portal. Who's there? How dare you? How dare you? Protect Her Majesty. The dwarfs in the palace became alert when they saw the teleportation portal that suddenly appeared. Back off. The King of Dwarfs stopped everyone. He looked at Aisha, who walked out of the portal, and said, Excuse me. We've moved to a new place, and our home hasn't been built yet. No wonder my people are so cautious. How do you know it's not an enemy? Aisha said. Haha, after the Battle of Snowfire, I don't think anyone would use a teleportation portal to barge into this mountain. The King of Dwarfs laughed. The King of Dwarfs is really wise, Aisha said. Ha ha ha, it's okay for my people to say this, but it's too fake for you to say it. The Dwarf King laughed and said, All right, you don't have to be so polite. I know that when my father was still in power, you had already shocked the world. I have also heard a lot about your deeds, so I don't look down on you. You shouldn't look down on me either. Why don't we just get straight to the point? I wonder why you have specially come here? The relationship between dwarfs and witches can't be described as good. That's straightforward, Aisha said with a smile. Well, the map in Jilin's hand was given by you. How do you know it's me? The King of Dwarfs said. Well, this place can't be compared with the outside world. There are many monsters, ores, and resources here, but there are few normal people. There are even fewer people who can take out a map. Except for the three of us and you dwarfs, if you can find another person who can read in this endless volcano, I'll consider you powerful, Aisha said. I see. The King of Dwarfs nodded slightly. Battel has so many subordinates, but none of them can read? What do you think? Aisha said coldly. So, you admit it? I don't want to deny it at all. The King of Dwarfs said. Okay, then why did you give the map of the capital to Jilin? Aisha said. Giving people a map is naturally to let them go to the place on the map. The King of Dwarfs said. Go there for what? Aisha asked. To find something. The King of Dwarfs said. Aisha was a little puzzled. That simple? What else? The King of Dwarfs was happy. Are you going to massacre the city? If it's necessary, it's not impossible for Jilin to do that, Aisha said in a deep voice. Besides, why would he go so far for a thing? Because this thing is very important, the King of Dwarfs said. What thing? Aisha asked. God's soul. When the king of dwarfs mentioned this word, his eyes seemed to light up. God's soul? What's that? Aisha asked. God's soul. The king of dwarfs said. Are you fooling me? Aisha narrowed her eyes, and there seemed to be a snowstorm brewing in her narrowed eyes. How can it be? There really is a God's soul. The king of dwarfs waved his hand and said. There are gods in the world, so naturally there is a God's soul. According to legend, the gods' power is unfathomable. They have the ability to turn the world upside down and summon the wind and rain. However, everything in the world has a beginning and an end, and gods are no exception. When the gods are about to die, they will condense all the energy in their body into a solid form and pass it down as the inheritance of the god. This is the god's soul. After the battle of snow and fire, I don't believe in the word pass the most now. Aisha said. This is something that I, the king of dwarfs, have passed down from generation to generation. It shouldn't be wrong. The king of dwarfs said. The holy grimoire of light is passed down from generation to generation by the Church of Light. Lord set up a large array outside the mobile city according to the holy grimoire of light, but in the end it was useless. Instead, it destroyed his own mind. Aisha said. The holy grimoire of light? It's just a bluff. How can you believe it? The king of dwarfs said disdainfully. Then how can you be sure that your legend is not a bluff? Aisha asked. Or how can you be sure that your legend is not wrong? One person passed it down to another, and the truth will be different. Not to mention that it has been passed down from generation to generation for such a long time. Maybe it has been changed beyond recognition in the process of passing down. Because this matter is related to the forging of artifacts. The ancestors of dwarfs will not be careless about this matter. The king of dwarfs said confidently. Aisha was silent, because she had no reason to doubt the king of dwarfs' outrageous legend. Everyone in the world knew the attitude of the dwarves towards forging, and they also knew how obsessed the dwarves were with the word artifact. If there was a chance to forge an artifact, the dwarves would not hesitate to die for it. It was really unimaginable that the king of dwarfs would make a mistake in this matter. Then there was no need to ask why Jilin wanted to go to the Middle Empire. He naturally wanted to turn that giant sword into an artifact. Perhaps the king of dwarfs used this as a condition to persuade Jilin to go to the Middle Empire. Then, the era of gods is long gone, and there are no gods in this world. Why is the god's soul in the Middle Empire? What is the god's soul used for? Aisha asked. Chapter 81. What's a god's soul for? The dwarf king asked. According to legends, it has three main uses. The first is its fundamental use, which is to pass down the power of the gods. The gods can easily become stronger by absorbing gods' souls. So it's like that. The gods are really scary, Aisha said while biting her nails. They're gods after all. The dwarf king didn't seem to care. The second is that it's a necessary material for forging divine artifacts. Without it, forging divine artifacts would be nothing but empty talk. In other words, if I want to forge a divine artifact, I must first kill a god. Aisha asked. That's right. The dwarf king said. But as far as I know, only divine artifacts can truly kill a god. Aisha said. That's not bad. The dwarf king said. Then, where did the first divine artifact come from? Aisha asked. Heh! The dwarf king was stunned for a moment, and then he couldn't help but laugh out loud. He really didn't expect Aisha to ask such a question. What are you laughing at? Aisha was puzzled, and she was a little angry. This was because she was very familiar with the dwarf king's expression. It was the expression that witches often use to look at idiots. Nothing, nothing. The dwarf king waved his hand. He could see that Aisha was a little angry. But you really don't know about this? Really? Aisha said angrily. Is it strange that I don't know? It's very strange. Who doesn't know in the world? You should know as well. the Dwarf King said naturally. Then hurry up and say it. Aisha finally couldn't take it anymore. Witches had always been famous for their wisdom and knowledge. They were proud of their profound knowledge, and at the same time, they were arrogant in this matter. But today, the Dwarf King actually mocked her ignorance. How could she not fly into a rage out of humiliation? The so-called divine artifacts are the weapons of the gods. Of course, the gods have them. The first divine artifact that humans had was personally bestowed by the god of darkness from the divine realm. The Dwarf King said, "Didn't you say that you have mastered the dark scripture and can directly communicate with the god of darkness? He didn't tell you? I see." Aisha pondered for a moment. "I didn't communicate with the god of darkness." The Dwarf King spread out his hands indifferently, indicating that he didn't care. "What about the third one?" Aisha asked. "The third one has a probability, and it's very low," the Dwarf King said. "An extremely high-quality soul could possibly give birth to a new god. How low?" "It's low enough to be ignored." "Then why did the Middle Empire have such things?" Aisha asked. "The stories of the mythological era have been passed down. Many of them have been lost. All we know is that God created humans and then enslaved them. Then, humans were dissatisfied and defeated God, winning the world." At this point, the Dwarf King's eyes seemed to be shrouded in a thin layer of mist. What was faintly discernible was that incomparably vast and crazy era. Although there are only a few words, it's not difficult for us to see the cruel, grand, and magnificent battles between humans and God. Aisha didn't say anything. It seemed that even she was captivated by the magnificent era described by the Dwarf King. However, the strange thing was that she had already memorized the Dwarf King's words by heart. With the dark scripture in hand, her understanding of the mythological era shouldn't be any less than the Dwarf King. "Since there were wars, there must be battlefields," said the Dwarf King. "The battlefields of the mythological era must have left behind the legacies and souls of countless generations of humans. But for some reason, from the legends it seems that there were wars in every corner of the world. But for us, the later generations, it's so difficult to find the remains of the battlefield. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack." "You mean, there's an ancient battlefield from the mythological era in the capital?" Even Aisha couldn't help but be shocked and excited. "That's right," said the Dwarf King. "I have one last question." Aisha took a deep breath and calmed herself down. "Please ask." "Why do you think Jilin still wants the divine artifact?" asked Aisha. "He's already invincible. Why does he still want to become stronger? Who knows? There's no such thing as invincible in this world before," said the Dwarf King. "But if you want me to guess, since he's already invincible, he should consider going up to heaven. Since he wants to go up to heaven, it's natural for him to want the divine artifact." That's true. The next day. Red Dragon Palace. It was still so gorgeous here. The wide magma river below was flowing. The light of the fire and the knight's key shone on the completely glazed stone wall, illuminating the whole space. Jilin's huge body was curled up on the treasure mountain, forming a sharp contrast with the three tiny humans standing in front of him. "What?" Bane exclaimed. "We're finally leaving? That's great. I couldn't wait any longer." As a dragon that could easily sleep for decades, or even hundreds of years, Jilin could not understand Bane's boredom. But after spending so much time with humans, Jilin could more or less understand that human life was too short, ranging from 60 years to 100 years. It was not an exaggeration to say that it passed in the blink of an eye. Humans with such a short lifespan naturally had to use all their strength to struggle blindly. Just as a powerful human said, the passing of time was like the passing of time. Therefore, they couldn't give up day and night. Therefore, Jilin didn't say anything. He just breathed heavily to show that he didn't care. "What are we going to do in the capital?" asked Staya. "You'll know when the time comes," said Jilin like yesterday. Alright, no matter what we're going to do, we can't stay like this. I think there are already pictures of us in all the big cities of the human race. Aisha smiled. We have to change our appearance. You can do that? Bane exclaimed. I can even turn him into a human. Aisha pointed at Jilin and said domineeringly. You think I can't turn you guys into humans? That's true. Turning humans into frogs is a witch's specialty, said Staya. Are we going to turn into frogs? Bane asked carefully. He seemed to be very reluctant. If you keep talking, I'll turn you into a frog. Aisha glared at Staya and said. Humph, Staya didn't dare to talk back. Aisha had already finished drawing a magic circle while they were talking. Please. Let's go together, Staya said in a deep and serious voice. Agreed. Bane yelled. Okay. Aisha was a little helpless. Bane and the other two walked in together. A purple light immediately surrounded them. When the light disappeared, 3 people with black hair and eyes from the Middle Empire stood in the magic circle. It seems like you've been traveling around the continent for so many years with this ability. Staya took out a mirror out of nowhere. She looked at herself and nodded in satisfaction. Please watch your words, Staya said. At the same time, a magic mirror floated in front of her. She was carefully examining her own appearance. Bane looked left and right. He didn't think the 2 of them were going to lend him the mirror. He thought about it and gave up. We're all done now. The problem is, what are you going to do? Aisha said to Jilin. Even if you're in human form, I can't easily change your appearance. It's fine, Jilin said. Why do you all have black hair and black eyes? Is there a reason? In the Middle Empire, this is the only way to not attract attention, Aisha said. Because they only think people with black hair and black eyes are on their side. Why is that? Jilin asked. No one knows, Staya said. There are 5 empires in total. Apart from the Middle Empire, the other empires have all kinds of people. There are people with different hair colors and eye colors. However, in the Middle Empire, there are only people with black hair, black eyes, and yellow skin. As long as they have black hair, black eyes, and yellow skin, they must be from the Middle Empire. So, they're a little xenophobic? Bane asked. He had grown up in a Western village. He knew very little about the Middle Empire. Not exactly. They think they can treat the people of other countries equally and amicably. They want to show the humans and other races that they are a great nation. In fact, that's what they do, Aisha said. However, they have an inexplicable and innate arrogance in their bones. But the people of the Central Empire believe in something called etiquette, so they don't want to show this arrogance. They even deliberately suppress it and try their best to show a humble and polite, I'm not looking down on you look. But occasionally they will inadvertently show it. I understand, Jilin said. Then, countless red light spots floated up from the lava. They gathered in front of Jilin and gradually turned into a human shape. Finally, they formed the appearance of a person from the Middle Empire wearing a warrior's outfit. Aisha and Staya had seen this before. They were not surprised. However, it was Bane's first time seeing this. He was shocked. He even wanted to poke this person's face. However, he was scared off by Jilin's calm gaze. Is this the only clone that's going with us? Aisha asked. It's enough, Jilin said. That's good too. Staya heaved a sigh of relief. How do you know about the clothes of the Middle Empire? Aisha looked at Jilin's clothes and asked curiously. That person who chopped off my arm with a sword seemed to be wearing this. Jilin said. That's good too, Aisha said calmly. What's good too? Bane asked. Nothing, Aisha said. Since everything is ready, let's go. Okay. Then, Aisha opened the teleportation portal. The 4 of them disappeared. Only Jilin's body was left lying motionless in the huge lava cave. It seemed like he would never move. However, it also seemed like he would spread his wings and rush out of the ground in the next second and fly into the sky. Suddenly, Jilin opened his eyes. His golden pupils were exposed to the air. The entire space became 2 to 3 times brighter. It was hard to open one's eyes. "You're here," Jilin said. "Yes," someone in the light answered. Chapter 82. It was still that familiar horse carriage. It was moving along a quiet path under the shade of a tree. The bright sunlight shone through the gaps between the leaves and formed a dazzling light spot on the ground and on the carriage. The air was filled with the wonderful smell of soil, leaves, and flowers. One would be intoxicated with just a slight sniff. It had been 2 months since the battle of snow and fire. It was April, the most beautiful month in the world. Everything was revived and full of vitality. Many creatures that couldn't move during the winter and could only rest were starting a new year at this time. For example, bears that hibernated for the whole winter were starting to look for food now. Farmers that rested for the whole winter were starting a new year now. Bandits that didn't have much business during the whole winter would definitely have a strong desire to start a new business now. "Hey!" A sudden shout came from the front of the horse carriage. Instantly, a few people dashed out from the trees on both sides of the road. They all looked fierce and had weapons in their hands. Staya and Aisha looked at each other and closed their eyes at the same time. "Listen up, the people in the carriage. I own this mountain, I planted these trees. If you want to pass through here, pay the toll. If you dare to say no, I'll kill you, not bury you." Jilin was confused by the scene in front of him. He leaned back and asked Staya, "What do you mean?" "I know," Bane said. "I heard from my master that this phrase has been passed down in the Middle Empire for thousands of years. In the Middle Empire, every robber has to say it before they act. It's an unwritten rule." "Oh, bandits." Jilin nodded and said, "Don't move, I'll go," Staya said as she dashed out of the carriage. She was agile and her movements were clean. She lived up to the name of the Knight of Light. "Haha, I really didn't expect that there would be an unexpected gain. It seems that we brothers can not only rob money today, but we can also rob a woman at the same time. Haha." When the bandits saw that there was only a weak woman coming down from the carriage, they felt that the other party no longer had any intention of resisting. "Brother, she's not that pretty," a short bandit said to the leader of the bandits after looking at Staya for a long time. Staya immediately sped up towards the bandits. "No matter what the girl in front of you looks like, no matter what her identity is, no matter what your reason is, you can't say that she's not pretty. It's the King law." "You're right," the leader of the bandits said with a lewd smile, "but I don't care." "Ha! Boss, you're so mighty." The short bandit gave a thumbs up and flattered him. Staya's eyes narrowed to an extremely dangerous angle. This was something he had learned from Aisha. It represented extreme shock or extreme anger. Staya walked in front of the leader of the bandits. The leader of the bandits grabbed Staya's shoulder with a lewd smile. "Come." Steel's fist landed on the bandit leader's face in an instant. Before he could finish what he wanted to say, he was sent flying. The rest of the bandits could clearly see their leader's teeth splattering all over the place. The leader of the bandits finally hit his head on a big tree. Crack! The tree broke in half. The leader of the bandits' face was covered in blood. The rest of the bandits looked at Staya in horror. Although gangsters were very loyal to each other, how could they care about that now? They were all bandits. Who would care about that? They didn't want to help their leader block this she-devil, but they also didn't want to find their leader's teeth on the ground. Therefore, after a shout of "Run!" all the bandits started to run. "None of you can run away." Staya clenched her fists so tightly that her knuckles cracked. At that moment, the scene was too horrible to look at. Screams could be heard everywhere. The one who was beaten up the most was the short bandit. Bane swallowed his saliva as he watched in the car. He couldn't bear to look at it. Although bandits and bandits didn't have the same ancestor, they were still brothers on the same path. Moreover, the scene of Staya fighting against the level 8 magical beast White Snow was still fresh in his mind. He felt that the leader of the bandits was in a bad situation now. Jilin watched with great interest. Aisha lowered her head and thought for a while. Then, she said to Jilin, I think we made a big mistake. Jilin was confused. I think our princess caught the wrong one, Aisha said. Ah? Why? Jilin asked in surprise. You see, no matter which megalosaurus kidnaps the princess in the story must be someone who is weak and weak. Aisha said, such a princess gives people the feeling that she is a rabbit that fell into a pack of wolves. There's no possibility of her rushing out on her own. She can also arouse the warrior's desire to protect her. Jilin nodded as he listened. Indeed, if Aisha didn't mention it, he wouldn't have realized it. Look at the one you caught. Aisha pointed at Staya, who was beating up the bandits, and said with disgust, Have you heard of a princess beating up 6 or 7 bandits? They can't even run away. Look at how badly they are beaten up. Look, their faces are covered in blood. Look, another one fainted. How tragic. This time, even Bane nodded silently. He felt that Aisha was right. Even Jilin pretended that he couldn't bear to look at it. He also felt that Staya was too cruel. However, Aisha couldn't help but roll her eyes at Jilin's pretentious acting. I think that the reason no warrior has gone to the Red Dragon Palace to save Staya is not because there's a problem with our plan, but because there's a problem with the princess, Aisha said. This princess is too strong. So what? Jilin said. No matter how strong she is, she's still a princess. If the hostage is too strong, there will be fewer people who can be saved, Aisha said. You said that if you catch a princess, there will be no warrior to save her. There will be countless cannon fodder that will die. But if you catch the warrior, who will dare to show up? That makes sense, Jilin said thoughtfully, but when we caught Staya, it was your idea. You said that you wanted to find trouble with the Church of Light to help you vent your anger. I didn't think of that either. Aisha smiled awkwardly. It's my first time doing something like this. I don't have much experience. What do you think we should do now? Jilin said. How about we change to another one? Aisha said tentatively. Change to another one that doesn't know how to cultivate? We can change to another one? Bane yelled in surprise. Forget it, Jilin said after thinking seriously. Forget what? Staya clapped her hands and walked towards the carriage. There were bandits lying on the ground behind her. Nothing, Bane said. The carriage was teleported from the Red Dragon Palace to a secluded path near the capital. According to Aisha, it was to avoid being noticed. From the path to the main road, they were not far from the capital. The city walls of the capital were magnificent and tall. Looking from afar, they could feel a sense of oppression. It seemed to reach the clouds. It seemed to be able to block off landslides and tsunamis. The city walls are so tall. Even Jilin exclaimed. They seem to be much taller than your city walls. Of course, Staya said. When it comes to building city walls, no one in the world can surpass the Middle Empire. It's just like the dwarves in the field of forging. That's quite impressive, Jilin said. Due to Aisha's little tricks, Jilin and the others successfully entered the capital. As soon as they entered the city, they stood at the end of a straight road. Bane had never seen such a wide road. The carriage they were in was given to them by the Duke, so it was definitely wide. But Bane felt that this road was wide enough for 40 carriages of the same size as theirs to drive side by side. At the other end of the road was the palace of the Middle Empire. In other words, this road ran through the entire capital. This was the world-famous Vermilion Bird Street. It was said that everyone who came to the capital for the first time would be shocked by the grandeur of this street. For example, Bane, but Jilin wasn't a human, so he didn't think so. He only felt that such a long and wide street was actually filled with bustling humans. This made him feel dizzy and annoyed. Jilin looked at the imperial palace at the other end of the street and the crowd that filled the street. For the first time in his life, He felt regretful, because he now had an inexplicable impulse. He wanted to stand in his current position and release a dragon breath at the palace. He wanted to blow the palace up into the sky and clean up the street. He regretted that he didn't come with his real body this time, so he couldn't do it. Let's change lanes, Jilin said. Aisha looked at Jilin's serious expression and didn't ask anything. She immediately drove the carriage to find a small path and went in. Although it was a small path, it was still very wide compared to the Vermilion Bird Street. But the strange thing was that this street was surprisingly quiet. There were only 2 or 3 people on this wide road. The doors on both sides of the road were closed. It was hard to imagine that this was a street in the capital of the Middle Empire. But Jilin was very satisfied. The carriage kept moving forward on this quiet street. Suddenly, a lively 3-story building appeared on the side of the road. Even during the day, it was still decorated with lanterns and colored banners. Its existence broke the silence of the whole street. Endless laughter could be heard coming from inside. Looking in from the door, one could see countless gorgeously dressed women faintly discernible in and out of sight. There was a huge golden sign hanging at the door. It said, "Spring Breeze House." "What is this place?" Jilin asked. Aisha and Staya looked at each other and didn't say anything. They looked a little embarrassed. On the other hand, Bane's eyes lit up as he said to Jilin, "This seems to be the legendary brothel." Chapter 83. Great, you don't know anything about other things, but you're quite knowledgeable about this. Aisha glared at Bane. Hee. Bane scratched the back of his head and tried to smile foolishly. Men, it's normal. Brothel? Jilin looked at the wooden building in front of him, which was relatively lively, and was confused. This building isn't green. Does it mean it's very light? Let me try. Jilin was about to get out of the car, but he was immediately stopped by the excited Bane. What are you doing? Bane asked. Didn't you say it's very light? Jilin said. I want to try lifting it. Lift your ass, Bane said angrily. If you lift this building, I'm afraid many people won't be able to lift it. Jilin was confused. F***ck off. Staya scolded. Ahem. Bane coughed awkwardly and leaned over to Jilin's ear, covering his mouth with his hand as he began to whisper something. Jilin's lips slowly curled up. But this industry is everywhere in the human world, what's so strange about it? Jilin asked. That's not right. Bane assumed a stance, as if he was about to explain everything to her. Please go ahead. Jilin also appeared very humble and accepted the advice. Other places, compared to the Middle Empire, are still lacking in style and artistic conception. They're not as elegant, for example. Bane tried hard to learn how to speak in the Middle Empire. Elegant. Staya finally couldn't take it anymore. She stood up and kicked Bane out of the car, then turned to look at Jilin. She thought about it and finally gave up. She probably couldn't kick him. Unexpectedly, Bane fell heavily on the ground from the car, but he didn't cry out in pain. Instead, he rolled on the ground and quickly stood up. He looked at Jilin and said, Let's go. What are you trying to do? Aisha couldn't sit still anymore. She really didn't know what Bane was thinking. Was he trying to bring the Megalosaurus to a brothel? If you want to go by yourself, Aisha said. I'm embarrassed, Bane whispered. You. Staya was furious. He was about to do such a shameless thing. What was there to be embarrassed about? Let's go. Jilin slapped the car and jumped off. He strode towards Spring Breeze restaurant. Staya was stunned. What should we do? We definitely can't stop Jilin. Aisha pondered. There's no other way. You go and find a place to stay. I'll go and buy some medicine. What medicine are you buying? Staya asked. The poisonous fangs of a 5-colored snake, the wings of a bat, red and white mushrooms, and the eyes of a crocodile, Aisha said. Why do you want to buy these? Staya asked. This is the secret recipe of my witch's poison. It has never failed in thousands of years, Aisha said gloomily. When they come back, I'll poison them. It might be difficult to poison Jilin with these things. Plus, he's just a clone now, Staya said. Then let's poison the one that can be poisoned first. Bane, that idiot. Aisha cursed in her mind. This whole thing was very strange. However, Bane was enchanted by the beauty and turned a blind eye to it. In this deserted street, it was likely that the entire street was doing this kind of business. If that was the case, why was this brothel still open when all the other brothels were closed? After all, how could a brothel be open during the day? She only hoped that it wouldn't cause any trouble. Otherwise, it would be troublesome. As soon as Jilin and Bane entered the brothel, a middle-aged woman with heavy makeup came up to them. She greeted them before she even got close. Oh, you two masters are here. I'm really sorry, but we've really run into a coincidence today. We've been booked by a noble person. Why don't the two of you come back later? Then, I'll ask my most lovely sister to accompany you and apologize to you. What do you think? The woman said. She couldn't say that she wasn't polite. However, Jilin was a creature. He wouldn't listen to her. At this moment, Jilin was having fun. Even Aisha and Staya couldn't stop him. How could she stop him? Jilin gently pushed the woman away, walked to a table, and sat down. The middle-aged woman was pushed to the ground. She immediately started rolling around. Someone's fighting! Someone's fighting! Someone, come! Instantly, a few burly men with tattoos all over their bodies rushed out from the back of the hall. Throw them out! The woman's voice was hoarse. What a cliché! Jilin took a sip of the tea on the table and shook his head. Don't fight. Let's talk. Bane stood in front of Jilin and shouted. He wasn't afraid of trouble, but Bane knew that if they fought, Jilin would definitely win. However, the purpose of coming to the brothel would be ruined, but how could the brothel's hired thugs listen to him? They rushed up without hesitation. Each of them looked fierce. Don't kill! Bane shouted. On the top floor of Chunfeng Lu had 3 floors. The first floor was the hall with dozens of tables and a huge stage. The second floor had various private rooms. Its function was self-evident. On the third floor, there was only one huge room. The decoration and layout of the room were simple and elegant. However, it wasn't difficult to feel the hidden luxury in this simple elegance. A picture of an orchid hanging on the wall was made by a master 100 years ago. The sandalwood incense burning in the incense burner, even the layman who did not know the value of goods, could clearly see that it was not ordinary. Those who knew a little more would understand that this was not incense, this was clearly gold. No, it seemed even more extravagant than gold. The noise from downstairs could be heard upstairs. The person guarding the door of the 3rd floor couldn't help but frown. Master Zhao, someone came in. A servant in black walked up to the gatekeeper and said, I heard. Zhao Qi said, Why don't you hurry up and ask the brothel keeper to send them out? If they disturb the young master, don't blame me for not protecting you. We don't need you to remind us. The servant said. When they came, the brothel keeper tried to persuade them to stop receiving guests. However, they refused to leave and even beat up my guards. Deliberately making trouble? Coming for the young master? Zhao Qi clenched the sword in his hand. It doesn't look like it. The servant said. It doesn't look like someone from the capital. Everyone in the capital knows that the 3rd prince always stays on the 3rd floor. Naturally, he wouldn't look for trouble. Oh! Zhao Qi was relieved to hear that. This manservant had spent many years in Spring Breeze House, a place where dragons and snakes mingled together, receiving and sending people off. After so many years, although he had no other skills, he still had the ability to judge people. Then I'll help you send them away. Zhao Qi said. Master Zhao, this person seems to have extraordinary strength. The servant said carefully. How long did it take to get rid of your guards? Zhao Qi said. To be honest, I didn't see clearly. The servant said. Didn't see clearly? I didn't see clearly. That's fine. If the hard way doesn't work, we'll use the soft way. Give them some money and send them away. Zhao Qi said. Master, such a powerful person can't be short of money. The servant said. Ah, old seven. A gentle voice came from the room. Young master. Zhao Qi bowed toward the room. What's the matter? It's so noisy that it's disturbing this young master's mood. The voice said. It seems to be two foreigners. They didn't know you were here and broke in. I'll send them away. Zhao Qi said. Foreigners? How foreigners? The young master said. They're citizens of the empire. Zhao Qi glanced downstairs and said. Then there's no need to be so hostile. The third prince said. First, they're not from another country. Second, they're not here for us. Why should we care about them? I'm afraid they'll disturb your mood. Zhao Qi said. What's there to be afraid of? Visiting a brothel in broad daylight. They must be people of the same nature. Ha 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 ha. The young master laughed. Then what do you mean? Zhao Qi said. Give them a private room. The third prince said. You heard? Zhao Qi looked at the servant. Understood, understood. The servant nodded and bowed. After that, he ran downstairs and went to the brothel owner who was still rolling on the ground. He said a few words to her. The brothel owner listened for a while and quickly got up from the ground. She put on a flattering smile and said, I was really blind before. I didn't know that the two of you knew each other. I'm sorry. Why didn't you say so earlier? You're just teasing us. It's really fun. Come, two guests, please come upstairs. I'm sure you'll be satisfied. Although Bane felt that the woman's attitude changed a bit abruptly, he didn't think too much about it and followed. After all, there were more important things to do. As for Jilin, he didn't care at all. On the contrary, he was more interested in the person on the third floor. He heard the conversation clearly. He was an interesting human. As the brothel owner spoke, she led them upstairs. The servant next to her understood that the brothel owner had misunderstood. It was just that it wasn't convenient to say more now. It was more important to deal with everything properly and not disturb the man on the third floor. The brothel owner led them to a private room and prepared a table of food. Then she said to the servant, Find two straightforward people and send them inside. Finish it quickly and send them away. Yes, mother. Jilin and Bane sat at the table. Jilin poured a glass of wine and asked curiously, What is this? It looks like water, but it smells very good. This is wine from the Middle Empire. Although it looks as clear as water, I heard that it tastes very spicy. Bane said as he took a sip. Cough, 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 cough. The rumors are true. Very good. Jilin also took a sip. You like it? Bane's face turned red. Yes. At this moment, the door of the private room was suddenly opened. Two women in revealing clothes and heavy makeup walked in. As soon as they entered the door, they smiled and said, Yo, where did these two young masters come from? They look so handsome. Chapter 84. Young master, young master. Zhao Qi called from outside the door. What's the matter? The third prince raised his head from the table, rubbed his sleepy eyes, and said vaguely, There's something wrong with the two people just now. Zhao Qi said, The third prince endured his headache and thought hard for a long time before he remembered who the two people Zhao Qi mentioned were. What happened? Come in and talk. Yes. Zhao Qi replied and pushed the door open. In the big room, there was only a table with messy cups and plate. The third prince was sitting alone at the table. No wonder he slept on the table, Zhao Qi thought. What's the matter? The third prince said. Young master, these two people are somewhat unusual. Zhao Qi said. Unusual in what way? The third prince seemed to be interested. But then again, if they could be seen as unusual in this kind of place, they must really be unusual. Among these two people, one of them is okay. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that he is inexperienced. After a few drinks with the girls of Spring Breeze brothel, he directly got drunk and passed out. Zhao Qi said, "Haha, this is going to a brothel in broad daylight? This kid is too nervous," the third prince said with a smile. At the same time, he remembered when he secretly ran out of his home and went to a brothel for the first time. It seemed to be similar to this kid. "What about the other one?" the third prince asked. "The other one is really a strange person." Zhao Qi sighed. "Young master, to be honest, I have been in the underworld since I was a child. After so many years, I can be considered to have some fame and have seen some heroes." The third prince shook his head and found a pair of chopsticks on the table. He put a peanut into his mouth and chewed carefully, ignoring Zhao Qi's seemingly modest but actually somewhat boastful words. What did he mean by a little famous? What did he mean by seen some heroes? Who in the capital hadn't heard of the name Seventh Master Zhao? But this humble one has never seen such a hero of the Wine Kingdom. With a beauty by your side, you're not moved at all. Zhao Qi said, "Young master, you don't know. That young man doesn't care about the beauties around him. He just keeps drinking, and he even drinks double-steamed wine. Although it's not a good wine, it's really strong." The third prince couldn't help but click his tongue as he recalled the spicy taste of the double-distilled wine. Yes, but that young man drank it like cold water. At first, he used a cup, then a bowl, and then a jar. Zhao Qi said, This is a ruthless person." The third prince sighed. At the same time, he felt that his head seemed to hurt even more. Isn't that so? Even Mama Wang was intimidated by his attitude. At first, she thought that this young master didn't fancy such vulgar women, so she sent in 2 or 3 girls. However, he was still unmoved. She changed them 2 or 3 times, but the results were the same. In the end, Mama Wang threw caution to the wind and didn't care about anything. She just moved in wine. Guess what happened in the end? Zhao Qi kept her in suspense. "Tell me what happened." The third prince was anxious. "He drank all the double-distilled wine in this Spring Breeze brothel," Zhao Qi said. There was a kind of yearning in his eyes that couldn't be concealed. "This is really unprecedented, a model for our generation. Drinking all the wine in the brothel. This is such an amazing thing. Only us brothers would dare to think about it. More than 30 jars of double-distilled wine, even Sir Sword Saint would be drunk." "Nonsense." The third prince slammed the table and shouted, "How could Sir Sword Saint be drunk? Even if he was drunk, he would still be performing a sword dance under the moonlight. How could he be the same as us mortals?" Yes, young master is right. This little one misspoke," Zhao Qi said with an extremely exaggerated smile. "Humph." The third prince coldly snorted and didn't say anything. After all, there were rumors that this guy in front of him was quite appreciated by Sir Sword Saint. Since the wine is finished, then this person left? The third prince subconsciously picked up the wine cup and took a sip. "No," Zhao Qi said. "Mother Wang told the young man that the wine was finished. The young man originally got up to leave, but something very embarrassing happened." "What is it?" Third young master poked his head out and asked, obviously interested. "The 2 of them didn't have any money on them," Zhao Qi said while holding back his laughter. "Ha ha ha ha. They dared to eat and dash in this Spring Breeze brothel. This is unprecedented." The third prince said, "Please come up for a chat." "Young master." Zhao Qi was really anxious when he heard his young master's words. "The 2 of them are of unknown origin, and their strength is unfathomable." "No matter." The third prince waved his hand and said, "1,000 cups of wine is too little to drink with a bosom friend. They are all wonderful people." "Yes," Zhao Qi replied. Jilin carried Bane on his shoulder with one hand, and countless wine jars rolled around his feet. He was very satisfied with today's drinks, so he was in a good mood now. According to Staya, this trip to the brothel could be said to be a happy one. Jilin now felt that the human race could always surprise him in unexpected places. Therefore, when he looked at the middle-aged woman in front of him and pointed at his nose and scolded him, he didn't immediately make this woman disappear from the face of the earth. Firstly, he was in a good mood, and secondly, it was because of what Bane said earlier. Don't kill people. But Jilin looked at the ugly woman in front of him, and the thumb and index finger of his other hand couldn't help but rub against each other. Inconspicuous sparks flew everywhere. There was a limit to a human's patience, let alone a dragon that was above all other creatures. What kind of existence is the dragon race? You are just an ant that is like a speck of dust, and you want me to pay for it? Even the millions of gods in the godly realm don't dare to think about the treasures of the dragon race. Just as Jilin glanced at the unconscious Bane again and decided to poke the human in front of him, a loud voice was heard. "Young hero, my master invites you." Madame Wang didn't even need to turn around to know that it was Zhao Qi who spoke. She didn't dare to say anything when she thought that it was the person upstairs who invited him, and she immediately left with her people. "Madame Wang, please walk slowly," Zhao Qi called out. The brothel owner froze when she heard this, and cold sweat appeared on her head. She wasn't afraid of anything else, but she was afraid that Zhao Qi would be polite. "My master said to trouble you to prepare another table of food and wine," Zhao Qi said. "Yes," Madame Wang replied softly, and immediately let out a sigh of relief. So he was helping the third prince pass on a message, no wonder. "Young hero, please." Zhao Qi gestured with his hand. Jilin raised his head and looked down at the human. This expression was very classic. In human terms it was called arrogant. But this was just Jilin's habit, and there was no deeper meaning. His body was too big, and even if he laid his head on the ground, he had to look down to see humans, dwarves, and so on, not to mention when he was standing or flying. So Jilin's eyes were mostly looking down, and he got used to it over time. But if he wanted to look down with his human body, he had to raise his head to see people clearly. Zhao Qi was so angry that the roots of his teeth were itching. He didn't expect this person to be so arrogant, but no matter what, he was still his master's guest, so he could only swallow his anger and say again, "Please." Jilin still looked at him, and his feet didn't move. His meaning was very clear. "Why should I see your master?" "Sir, the bill for this table of wine is on my master's account," Zhao Qi said angrily. When his master wanted to invite someone, when had he ever been so humble? It was always the other party who ran over in fear and trepidation. Jilin was still unmoved. "I didn't want to pay in the first place. How dare a little human try to get a share of the Megalosaurus treasure? How disgraceful! My master has good wine, and would like to taste it with you," Zhao Qi said while swallowing his anger. "Good wine? Compared to the one I just drank, which one is better?" Jilin asked. "Haha, compared to the wine you just drank, it's like the nectar of the finest wine." Zhao Qi felt that he had gained back some face. Where did this country bumpkin come from? He had never seen the world. "Let's go," Jilin said. Jilin took the lead and carried Bane up to the third floor. He pushed open the door and looked inside. It was an extremely spacious room. There was a table in the middle, and it was obvious that the dishes were newly served. Beside the table stood a young man with long hair, dressed in white, and a conspicuous jade pendant on his waist. He had a delicate appearance that was somewhat eye-catching. "Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Greetings." The third prince cupped his fists and bowed to Jilin, and said with a smile, "Others call me the third prince. May I know your name?" The third prince's etiquette was very strict, and no one could find any fault with it. Moreover, his voice was very gentle and calm, making people feel very comfortable. Presumably, even if Aisha was here, she would praise the third prince in her heart. He was really elegant and had an extraordinary spirit. Unfortunately, this was done in front of Jilin. Naturally, it was like playing the lute to a cow. Jilin still had that arrogant expression. He didn't respond to him at all. He opened his mouth and said, I heard that you have good wine here. Aren't you being too rude? Zhao Qi said. It's okay, it's okay. The third prince smiled and said, Brother is really not a common person. You are a straightforward person. Well, as the saying goes, we are all in the same boat. There is no need for us to have known each other before. In that case, please take a seat, brother. I think you look familiar? Jilin suddenly said. You. Chapter 85. You have seen me before? The third prince was a little stunned, but then he smiled and said, That shouldn't be possible. You must have mistaken me for someone else. That can't be. I shouldn't have remembered wrongly. Jilin was a little puzzled. Then may I ask if it's your first time in the capital? The third prince said. That's true, Jilin said. That's right. I've never left the capital since I was born, the third prince said. Then I must have remembered wrongly, Jilin said with a frown. Haha, let's not talk about it anymore. Perhaps my face is a little too common, the third prince said with a charming smile as he squinted his beautiful peach blossom eyes. Your face isn't considered common, Jilin said with a twitch of his mouth. Haha, you flatter me, brother, the third prince said happily. No, I'm telling the truth, Jilin said seriously. I can't really tell the difference between humans because in my opinion, most humans are pretty much the same. But even I can tell at a glance that you're different from other humans. A human male who looks like you really can't be considered common. Haha, brother's words are really humorous. The third prince's smile was a little stiff for the first time in his life. It was so fake that it wasn't so real. Brother, have a taste. This is a 30-year-old green fey wine. You're a hero of the wine kingdom. I have to let you taste this fine wine. The third prince personally poured a cup of wine for Jilin and said. Jilin didn't stand on ceremony at all. He reached out and took the wine jug beside the third prince and drank it all in one gulp. Jilin tasted it and frowned, saying, It doesn't taste as good as the one I just drank. What did you say? You actually said that green fey wine isn't as good as double-steamed wine? Zhao Qi couldn't hold it in any longer. To think that I even told young master that you were a hero of the wine kingdom. Who would have thought that you would be so ignorant? Old 7, you can't say that. As the saying goes, everyone has their own preferences. This brother likes to double-steam liquor, so he can be considered a hero. The third prince was actually able to smooth things over for Jilin, and it seemed that he was indeed a gentleman. Jilin looked at the two humans singing and shouting in front of him. He simply ignored them and stood up, carrying Bane and walking out. Brother, what are you doing? The third prince asked in surprise. At this moment, no matter how good his self-restraint was, no matter how shrewd he was still shocked to the point of being at a loss for what to do. Zhao Qi, who was standing at the side, almost pulled out his saber. What was going on? This person. I invited him to drink a cup of wine, but in the end, he's really going to leave after drinking a jug of wine. He's not even going to take a bite of the dishes? Was it really that simple? Was he that cool? The third young master had never seen someone like Jilin before. Even though he couldn't say that he was a celestial being, he was starting to view Jilin in a new light. Furthermore, he had heard from Zhao Qi that Jilin's martial prowess was extraordinary. The third prince only rolled his eyes twice before he made up his mind. Brother, take care. The third prince stopped Jilin. Brother's actions are indeed unexpected. You're extremely free and unrestrained. You're not an ordinary person. Jilin stopped and looked at the third prince without saying a word. No matter what, he was still a human who had just invited him to drink. It wouldn't be good to kill him just because he blocked his way. Brother, although you're free and unrestrained, unlike us, it's still not good to come to a brothel to drink and not pay. The third prince joked. Brother, you left home in a hurry and didn't care much about money, so you forgot to bring it. That's why you're embarrassed? Jilin still didn't say a word. After all, there were very few humans who could make him willing to say a few words. But the third prince saw that Jilin didn't say a word and thought that he had guessed correctly. After all, it was such an embarrassing matter. It was normal for people to be speechless. I said just now that we're all in the same boat. There's no need for us to know each other when we meet. Since you and I have met, it's fate. Now that brother is embarrassingly short of money, this little brother just so happens to have a small fortune at home. If brother doesn't mind, please accept this. Third young master fished out an item wrapped in a handkerchief and handed it over to Jilin. Jilin took it and opened the handkerchief. It was a piece of gold the size of a palm. There was no need to distinguish whether it was real or fake. Jilin was too familiar with gold. He was a dragon that slept on gold every day. He only needed to touch it and he knew that this piece of gold must be of high quality. The third prince thought that Jilin would definitely refuse to accept it, or at the very least decline. But he didn't expect that Jilin would suddenly beam with joy. With a flip of his hand, the piece of gold disappeared. And for the first time ever, he smiled at the third prince. "You're a good human." Jilin reached out and patted the third prince's shoulder very carefully. He was afraid that he would accidentally hurt this person. The third prince was completely confused. In this life, other than his parents, no one had ever talked to him in such a condescending tone. This person is really hard to understand. The third prince sighed in his heart. "Get out of my way. I'm looking for someone." A pleasant female voice exploded in the ears of the third prince and Zhao Qi with an unimaginable volume. It was really hard to imagine that a woman could shout so loudly. Judging from the voice, the person who spoke, no, it should be the person who shouted, was at the entrance of Spring Breeze Brothel. Zhao Qi thought in his heart. "Ha ha!" The third prince couldn't help but laugh. A woman coming to a brothel in broad daylight and making such a big fuss. Naturally she was looking for someone. Could it be that she was looking for fun? Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the wind was heard. Something was approaching at high speed. In a split second, Zhao Qi made a judgment. He immediately pulled out his saber and stood in front of the third prince. Could it be a hidden weapon? No, a hidden weapon wouldn't make such a loud sound. And from the sound it should be a flat object. Gotcha! In the blink of an eye. In just a moment, the flat object that Zhao Qi judged pierced through the door of their room and stuck in it, poking its head out of the room. The third prince stuck his head out from behind Zhao Qi and took a closer look. This seemed to be the door of Spring Breeze Brothel? The third prince already had a picture in his mind. A lonely woman, sitting alone at home, waiting for her husband or boyfriend. But she didn't expect that she would only sit at home for one night. It was really like boarding an orchid boat alone, with only the moon filling the western tower. The next day, the woman unexpectedly found out from the mouth of her neighbor that her man had actually spent the night at Spring Breeze Brothel, and abandoned her. A kind of lovesickness. But there was only one thing to worry about. This was very wrong. She immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation and came to find him. A woman, in broad daylight, barged into a brothel to find a man. This was naturally not a rare thing in a brothel, but each line had its own rules. Helping a customer block the madam of the house, and letting the customer take the opportunity to slip away, was within the scope of the brothel's business. One wanted to enter, and the other wanted to block. Naturally, a dispute arose. That woman's feelings couldn't be erased, and she couldn't take it lying down. So, she fought with the brothel staff. The story up to this point was very reasonable. There was only one point. How did that woman tear down the brothel's door, throw it on the third floor, and break through her extraordinary door? One had to know that this wasn't something that could be accomplished just by having a high enough cultivation level. It also required an extremely strong body. But in this capital, he hadn't heard of any young lady who walked the path of body refinement, not to mention reaching such a high level of cultivation. Could it be that General Luo's daughter had a breakthrough in cultivation? That's not right. I haven't heard of it. Moreover, it can't be so fast. Could it be that the female marshal kissed her? That couldn't be. Marshal Qin was ordered to guard the western border. He wasn't in the capital. I haven't heard of Marshal Qin having a man either. Then who was this woman? The third prince wondered. Soon, hurried footsteps could be heard in the corridor on the third floor. The side of the door that was still intact was pushed open, and a slender woman from the Middle Empire appeared at the door. It was Staya in disguise. Why are you here? Jilin was curious. Brother? Do you know her? The third prince asked. Friend, Jilin said after thinking for a while. If grabbing someone out of their home can be considered as a way to make friends. Jilin added in his heart. She asked me to come and find you, Staya said impatiently. What about him? Who is he? Staya pointed at Bane, then at the third prince and asked. He accidentally drank too much. This trash, why did I take a liking to such a plaything back then? Jilin was a bit depressed. Who was he? He never thought that he would have to carry a human on his back one day. He was ashamed to face the ancestors of the dragon race. As for him, Jilin looked at the third prince. Ah, nice to meet you, miss. Third young master bowed to Staya once again, fully displaying his poise and temperament. My name is Song Yu. I had a great chat with this brother. We felt like old friends at first sight, and we became close friends. Miss, are you friends with this brother? I don't think so. Staya thought for a while and said, You became close friends with him at first sight? Staya didn't believe it at all. She didn't know what kind of person Jilin was, but at least she knew that Jilin wouldn't feel like old friends with a human at first sight, unless it was someone like Bane who could do something to move Jilin. But if what this person said was true, and he really felt like old friends with Jilin at first sight, then this person was very important, that's right. We feel like old friends even when we grow old. Don't you think so, brother? The third prince winked at Jilin, and secretly gave him a piece of gold. Yes. Jilin calmly took the gold and nodded. Staya understood. So this was what feeling like old friends at first sight meant. Chapter 86. Miss, you and this brother are friends, and this brother and I feel like old friends at first sight. Speaking of which, the two of us can be said to be fated. Third young master said, Since that's the case, may I ask for your name? It would be more convenient for us to meet in the future. F***ck off. Staya said straightforwardly. What she said didn't match her identity as the princess of the empire. After listening for a long time, he finally understood what this person meant. It turned out that he was a licentious young master. Moreover, looking at this face that even Stee had to admit was very good-looking, Stee felt that just based on this face alone, it was enough to conclude that many ignorant girls must have fallen into the hands of this scum. No matter if he was a knight of light who respected females, a saintess with a high status, or just a female, he was a thorn in Staya's side. Let's go. Staya pulled Jilin's arm and walked out while saying to Jilin, She is cooking for you guys in our temporary residence. She asked me to call you guys back for dinner. She knows how to cook. Jilin was shocked. I really didn't know, haha, of course. Staya said, but there was a hint of malice in her voice. Wait. The third prince called. Brother, it seems like the three of you have never been to the capital. You must have something important to do this time. If you have any trouble in the future, you can come and find me here. The third prince's words were very warm and polite, but Staya and Jilin ignored him and left without looking back. Young master, why did you do that? Zhao Qi asked curiously. No matter how he looked at it, the young master and that country bumpkin just now didn't seem to have a good conversation. The third prince thought for a while and said, Don't you think that girl is very special? Zhao Qi heard this and froze for a second. He frowned and understood. His young master's bad habit of loving every girl he met was acting up again. Young master once said that every woman is unique, and has their own uniqueness. Even though Zhao Qi was feeling very helpless, she still did her best to cooperate with her young master. That's true. The third prince made his trusted subordinate choke. But she is very, very special. Yes. Zhao Qi nodded. He thought that every girl said the same thing. Special, very special, Zhao Qi. The third prince called softly. His voice seemed to contain endless emotions. Young master, please, Zhao Qi said. Do you know a poem? The third prince said, There is a beauty, I will never forget her. If I don't see her for a day, I will go crazy. I know, Zhao Qi replied. How could he not know? Zhao Qi had followed the third prince for many years. He had indeed learned many things, including poems and songs. Among them, Zhao Qi first learned this poem. Because every time the third prince saw a girl he liked, he would recite this poem. After reciting it for 2 days, he would begin to roam the 4 seas in search of a beautiful woman. He would search the entire city for her. Then, there was the story of keeping a mistress in a golden house. The third prince made a vow of eternal love to the girl, saying that he would hold her hand and grow old together. They would be of one mind forever. They would be together until death. Zhao Qi could clearly see that every promise she made was absolutely sincere and sincere. She was not deceiving her. The third prince's sincerity, coupled with his eloquence, even if he could not move the heavens or the earth, it was no problem to move the inexperienced girl in front of the third prince. Finally, it was, helping each other in times of need is better than forgetting each other in the pugilistic world. Although these things sounded a little immoral and had endless consequences, Zhao Qi had never tried to persuade the third prince. Because the third prince was always able to handle these things very well. But this time, it was a little different. Young master, these 3 people are not from the capital, Zhao Qi said. So what? The third prince said. These are troubled times. These 3 people have extraordinary strength. Moreover, they chose to enter the city at this time. Although I may be overthinking, it is better to be safe than sorry. If these 3 people really have bad intentions, then wouldn't young master be inviting trouble? Zhao Qi said. Inviting trouble? The third prince said, This is the capital. What kind of trouble can come to me? Heavenly fire, Zhao Qi said. The third prince was silent for a long time. Is there a need to be so careful? It's always good to be careful, Zhao Qi said. If you are always so careful, wouldn't life be too boring? The third prince said, Moreover, I stay in the brothel every day. Isn't this being careful and protecting myself? It's a special time, Zhao Qi said. How is it a special time? The third prince still felt that Zhao Qi was making a mountain out of a molehill. The Middle Empire is connected by mountains and seas. It has a vast territory and is the largest empire in the human world. There are more than tens of millions of people in the empire. Such a big empire, when is there not a single day of trouble? You are making a fuss over nothing. Young master, it's like this. Zhao Qi felt that if he didn't pull the young master out of the wine jar, he wouldn't be able to hold on any longer. He planned to tell the young master about the recent situation. How could he let the young master fall in love with each other every day? More than a month ago, 16th young master took advantage of the few days when Lord Sword Saint was participating in the Battle of Snowfire to plot a rebellion. On the 28th of February, he led the 3,600 soldiers of the Left Guard camp to attack the Imperial Palace in a futile attempt to overturn the universe. 16th young master. The third prince thought for a moment. Wyrm? Yes, Zhao Qi said. But as far as I know, on the 28th of February, Lord Sword Saint had already been back for several days. The third prince said, Yes. But Lord Sword Saint was heavily injured in the Battle of Snowfire. After returning, he went into seclusion to recover and hasn't come out. Zhao Qi said. I know this. The third prince said. But even if Lord Sword Saint was heavily injured, How could Li Wenruan have the guts to rebel under Lord Sword Saint's watch? Even if he wanted to rebel, it wouldn't be his turn. That fourth prince, sixth prince, and seventh prince, aren't they all eagerly thinking about this matter? How could he be the one to take the lead? According to Prime Minister's conjecture, he should have been used as a tool. Zhao Qi said. "Hm?" The third prince said curiously. "Where did you hear this from Prime Minister?" "Taiji Palace, when Prime Minister was drinking tea with His Majesty." Zhao Qi said. "You even have people in Taiji Palace?" The third prince was shocked. "Young master spends his days in a drunken stupor, indulging in women. As a subordinate, I naturally have to do my best." Zhao Qi said. "You're too much." The third prince said angrily. "This subordinate deserves to die," Zhao Qi said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. He didn't have any intention of admitting his mistake. Indulging in women? That's admiration, that's respect. Do you understand? I'm cherishing women. So that's the main point, Zhao Qi thought to himself. Young master. Zhao Qi had no choice but to interrupt his young master's incessant speech. Otherwise, his young master would probably spend 4 hours explaining to him the essential difference between him and a perverted scoundrel. All right, you can continue. But Little 16th's rebellion isn't a big deal. How many of the palace guards and soldiers were injured? The third prince saw that Zhao Qi was really anxious and stopped joking with him. None were injured, Zhao Qi said. What happened? The third prince asked. 16th young master was captured by General Luo in front of the palace gate. Zhao Qi said. General Luo? The third prince thought for a moment and said in surprise, Could it be Luo Yu? Yes. Zhao Qi said. The nephew of the southern Marshal Luo Fenghu? Little 16th was the former commander of the left guard camp? The third prince couldn't believe it. Yes. Zhao Qi said. 16th young master can let this person continue to stay in the left guard camp? The third prince asked. Yes. Zhao Qi said. 16th young master still led him and his soldiers to rebel? The third prince asked. Yes. Zhao Qi said. Then little 16th young master is really pitiful. The third prince sighed. He didn't even touch the palace gate, right? Yes. Zhao Qi said. How could the royal family produce such a piece of trash? The third prince cursed. Yes. Zhao Qi said. Can you use another word? The third prince said bitterly. Don't you think it's a little perfunctory? Yes. Zhao Qi said. Great minds think alike with His Majesty. That's what His Majesty said. The third prince was silent for a long time. After a while, he let out a long sigh. Sigh. Fine. Let's not talk about him. It's just a small matter. The royal family has so many children. It's not a big deal to lose a few. Is there anything else? There's also the Megalosaurus from the Battle of Snowfire. Zhao Qi said. His Majesty thinks it's a great enemy of the entire human race. Even so, we don't have any good ideas at the moment. We can only deal with whatever comes our way. At worst, we'll just die together. So, there's no need to talk about this. Is there anything else? The third prince said. The last one. Ever since the Sword Saint entered the legendary realm, he set his sword, flowing light, as the core of the great Qian Kuan array. He thought it was foolproof, but he didn't expect the flowing light sword to break during the Battle of Snowfire. Zhao Qi said. The great Qian Kuan array. Something happened. The third prince was shocked. Of course. Zhao Qi said. How serious is it? The third prince asked in a low voice. This matter is too confidential. We don't know. Zhao Qi said. Phew. The third prince seemed to be relieved. That scared me. I can't imagine how I'd feel if I heard the details of the great Qian Kuan array from you. Young master, you still care about the world. Zhao Qi said. I can't say for sure. Third young master shook his head and took another big gulp of wine. Young master, you can't do this anymore, Zhao Qi said anxiously. He felt that all his words were in vain. What country, the world, the deep brotherhood, the crisis of life and death. Don't talk about waking up his young master from a drunken dream. He couldn't even cause a ripple in his young master's wine pool. The third prince waved his hand at Zhao-Qi. I heard what you said just now. But what you said, even the sword saint and his majesty can't solve it. What can I do? I can only drink today and drink tomorrow. Haha, I don't care. Zhao-Qi looked at the third prince, who was drinking without restraint, and thought to himself, the third prince. Is he still unwilling to call his majesty father? Chapter 87. Jilin followed Staya and carried Bane back to their temporary residence. Staya found this house through the Adventurers' Union. It was located in the center of the imperial capital, beside the Fanxing Lake. There were a few willow trees planted around the house. The environment was fresh and pleasant, above average. Jilin entered the house and placed Bane on the chair in front of the dining table. He scanned the surroundings and finally stood by the window. He looked at the street outside the window and the crowd on the Fanxing Lake that annoyed him. He suddenly felt that it was a wise decision to bring Staya and the others along. Otherwise, he would not be able to do these trivial things. Yo, you're back. Aisha came out of the kitchen and greeted him enthusiastically. She was holding a rectangular wooden tray with 2 white porcelain bowls on it. Come, let's eat. I didn't expect this, Jilin exclaimed. What did you not expect? Aisha asked. Nothing, Jilin said. Jilin walked back to the table. He was very curious about what kind of food this beautiful witch would make. Jilin glanced at the bowl and then at Aisha. He felt that the bowl looked familiar. Wake up, wake up. Aisha patted Bane. Bane slowly woke up. Come, drink a bowl of hangover soup, Aisha said in a tone so gentle that it made people's hair stand on end. Bane was startled awake by Aisha's tone. He opened his eyes and saw the bowl of hangover soup in Aisha's hand. The clean white porcelain bowl was filled with a purplish-black viscous liquid. Black smoke constantly drifted out from the top of the bowl. It was obvious that this kind of thing was impossible to consume as long as one looked at it. However, the strange thing was that the fragrance that drifted out of the bowl was so sweet and enticing. What is this? Bane asked in a trembling voice. This is hangover soup, Aisha said in a sweet voice. You're making me sad. Aisha, sister. Bane swallowed and turned his neck stiffly to look at Aisha. He felt cold sweat coming out of his back. He had to lower his voice and say, We have no grudges, no grudges. Why do you have to do this? If something happens to me, it won't do you any good, right? And what are you talking about? Why would sister harm you? Aisha said with a smile. This is the hangover soup specially made for you when I saw you were drunk. Good boy, drink it. Sister, Ben screamed. I was wrong. I will never drink again. Shut up. Aisha shouted, Drink it? Not a drop. Bane pouted, feeling wronged. It seemed like he couldn't avoid it today. Fine. It was better to get the pain over with, Bane thought to himself. Bane took the spoon out of the bowl and put it aside. Who would want to savor this kind of thing one spoon at a time? He held the white porcelain bowl with both hands, raised his head and began to gulp down the soup. Jilin nodded silently as he watched from the side. He thought to himself, No wonder you're a human that I like. You're such a hoodlum. Was this what Staya said to him? Even if you die, you won't regret it? Jilin felt that the soup looked familiar. Why did it look familiar? It was when he first met Aisha. He had seen Aisha make something similar with his own eyes. At that time, at the lowest level of the Red Dragon Palace, right under his nose, Aisha used a big pot that was big enough to stew 2 Banes. She boiled a pot of liquid of the same color and stirred it with a wooden stick. After a while, more than half of the stick was gone, as expected. Bane suddenly stopped after drinking half of the soup and threw the bowl on the table. The white porcelain bowl rolled on the table twice, and the remaining liquid spilled all over the table. Bane grabbed his neck with both hands and raised his head to the sky. His eyeballs were bulging out, panting heavily. Suddenly, he used one of his hands to slap Ji Lin's arm as he screamed, "It's poisonous! It's poisonous!" "Yes, I saw it before you drank it. It was obvious." Ji Lin nodded calmly. "Save." Bane said the last word and fell onto the table weakly. Ji Lin put his finger on Bane's neck. "Not bad, he's not dead." Staya changed her clothes and came downstairs. She found a rag and started wiping the table. Aisha looked at the bowl in front of Ji Lin and then looked at Ji Lin. Ji Lin picked up the bowl and drank it without saying anything. His expression did not change at all. Boring. Aisha curled her lips and said disappointedly, "This is just my clone. I can give up my sense of taste if I don't want it," Ji Lin said. "Then what is your real body doing?" Aisha asked. "Sleeping," Ji Lin said. "Do you think we will believe that?" Staya said. "Why not?" Ji Lin said, "You know, dragons love to sleep. That's when you have nothing to do and are bored, right?" Staya said, "If you want, you can go for hundreds of years without sleeping, right?" "Oh, you know a lot," Ji Lin said with a smile. "Is it from that scamming book again?" "It's the sacred book of light," Staya said. "All right, I believe you." Aisha raised her hand to stop Staya and Ji Lin from arguing. "Now that we are in the capital city, shouldn't you tell us why we are here?" "Why we are here?" Ji Lin said with a smile. "Don't you already know?" "Are you spying on me?" Aisha said. "No, I know everything in the Red Dragon Palace, but for some reason, I didn't use this ability," Ji Lin said. "Then how did you know?" Aisha asked. "The Dwarf King told me, of course," Ji Lin said. "I didn't expect that he would tell you something like that." Aisha said. "You are guarding against us?" Staya said. "You are just a human, what a joke," Ji Lin said with a smile. "Plus, we went through that battle. You pointed your sword at me, and she let go of all the humans I wanted to kill. Learning from experience is one of the few advantages that humans have. You promised me first," Aisha said. "Why can't you live in peace with humans?" Staya said. "Then why can't humans live in peace with dwarves?" Ji Lin said. "Just because you are stronger than dwarves, you can be aggressive? Just because you are stronger, you can destroy other people's homes? Peace is broken by humans, it has always been like this. That's what you said." Staya was startled. She didn't expect that the righteous thoughts that she always instilled in Ji Lin would turn out like this in Ji Lin's body. What was he doing? Was he going to help when he saw injustice? "Stop," Aisha said. "Okay, let's not talk about this for now. Let's talk about what we should do now. You want the god spirit?" "I have to get it," Ji Lin said. "Then do you know where the god spirit is?" Aisha said. "Underground." Ji Lin pointed at the ground. "Be more specific," Aisha said. "I can't be specific, but it could be under the entire imperial capital," Ji Lin said. "Then why don't you come here with your real body and search the entire imperial capital slowly?" Aisha asked. "Killing people is against the natural order. Even if I'm a dragon, how can I kill thousands of innocent people for my own selfish desires?" Ji Lin said. Staya, who was feeling down, instantly felt comforted when she heard Ji Lin's words. It seemed like her efforts were not all in vain. What Staya didn't know was that Ji Lin respected the essence of life, not because of the righteous thoughts that she instilled in him, but because of his mother's teachings when he was young. Also, if you want to find something in a house, you can't let the house turn into ruins, Ji Lin added. "I see," Staya thought. "Do you have any clues?" Aisha asked. Ji Lin waved his hand, and a map made of fire elements appeared on the table. Ji Lin pointed at a spot and said, "From the map, all the lines will pass through this point." "I knew it." Aisha looked up and said. Ji Lin was pointing at the palace. "What do you want to do?" Staya asked. "Rush into the palace and capture the emperor?" Jilin shook his head. If he wanted to capture the emperor, the palace would turn into ruins. This was something that had been tested before. If you want to enter the palace, there might be someone who can help, Aisha said. Who? Staya asked. The third prince Liu, Aisha said. You should have met before. Why do you say that? Jilin was curious. According to legends, unlike the other princes who lived in the palace or had their own mansions, the third prince, Liu, had a falling out with the emperor a few years ago for some reason. He rushed out of the palace in a fit of anger. But because of this, he didn't have much power in the Middle Empire, and the royal family of the Middle Empire had a tradition of fighting within the same family. In order to protect himself, the third prince showed his true feelings to his brothers and stayed in the brothel all year round to wear down his will. The other princes saw that the third prince really didn't want the throne, and they were brothers after all, so they just let him be. Although he had a falling out with the emperor, he didn't do anything serious. After all, he is the third prince of the emperor, and no one dares to offend him in the capital, Aisha said. That's right. Some people also said that because the third prince stayed in the brothel all year round, he met some shady people. Those people thought that the prince had a strong backing, so they all tried to please him. When the third prince was disheartened, he didn't reject any of them. Over the years, it was said that all the underground forces in the capital were under the control of the third prince, Staya said. Sti said, of course, in the eyes of the imperial family, this is actually a self-destructive thing. So, there was a brothel in the capital that was open during the day, Spring Breeze Brothel, Aisha said. So it was him. Jilin nodded and said, he was a good person. He even paid for my drinks and gave me 2 pieces of gold. Chapter 88. Why did he pay for your drinks? Aisha asked. Because he said that he felt like old friends at first sight, right? Jilin said confidently. After saying that, he even raised his head to look at Staya. Staya nodded in disgust. No, I mean, why didn't you pay for it yourself? Aisha asked. Because I don't have money. Jilin was a little anxious. Aisha did not understand why Jilin's mood suddenly changed, but she did not care. She never understood the temperament of the Megalosaurus. The distance between humans and the Megalosaurus was far greater than any huge canyon in the world. It was not something that humans could understand. However, that was not the main point. What Jilin said was too absurd. You don't have money. Aisha suddenly slammed the table and stood up. Her voice changed. Your money can support your real body. It's a mountain of gold without any exaggeration. Jilin thought seriously for a while. He felt that his statement was not very accurate, so he changed his words. I didn't bring it. You didn't bring it? I told you to bring money when you first came out. You are such a money-loving person. How could you forget to bring it? Aisha looked at Jilin and said, You did it on purpose? Yes. Jilin nodded. It's natural to spend money to buy things. Equivalent exchange, no gains without pains. Isn't that what you as a dragon agree on? Aisha said. It was the fundamental principle that the witches believed in. This is the natural order of the human race. I don't need to abide by it. Moreover, it's the human race who wants to plunder the treasures of the dragon clan that's even more treacherous. Jilin crossed his arms in front of his chest and said righteously. What happened? Aisha asked. Suddenly, Aisha remembered what Jilin said about the promise of humans in the Battle of Snowfire. Who said something to you? Indeed, there was a person who told me that all wealth is saved. I think it makes sense. Jilin nodded and said. Aisha and Staya both turned their heads to Bane, who was still lying on the table. Aisha leaned over the table and lifted Bane up with one hand. She shook him back and forth. Wake up, wake up. I don't want to drink any more. I don't want to drink any more. I was wrong, Bane said in a daze. His voice contained endless fear. Wake up. Aisha shook Bane's head back and forth. I don't want you to drink any more. I want to ask you something. Go ahead. Bane only dared to wake up when he heard Aisha say that he didn't want to drink anymore. His acting was so bad that it made people speechless. So, did you tell him that all the wealth is saved? Aisha asked. Who? Bane just woke up and didn't know what was going on. Him. Aisha pointed at Jilin. No. Absolutely not. Besides, how could I say something like that? The person who can say something like that must have a lot of wealth, right? I don't have any. Bane shook his head and firmly denied it. He already knew how bad and serious the consequences of talking nonsense with Jilin would be. Who else could it be? Aisha didn't believe it at all. Moreover, she had evidence. Only the three of us can say something like that to him. Aisha suddenly stopped halfway because she suddenly realized that it was no longer the time to go to the Snow Wind Empire. There was one more person who could talk to Jilin, and as Bane said, that person obviously had a lot of wealth. Indeed, it wasn't him who said that. Sure enough, Jilin answered. Aisha threw Bane back on the chair and quietly looked at Jilin. She really couldn't see through him. Wasteland. South of the southern Exian Empire. This was an endless wasteland. As far as the eye could see, there were only endless stones. It was shrouded in sand all day long. If a human didn't have any protective measures or an extremely tyrannical body, they would become very fragile. The violent sandstorm and small rocks could easily cause an unlucky human to lose his precious life, therefore, this place was deserted. But this wasn't the fundamental reason. Just like Jilin's greed for treasures, humans also had the same passion for land. This degree of harsh environment couldn't stop humans from opening up the world. Changing the natural environment was an important means of survival for humans, and they were very familiar with it. Some people in the southern Exian Empire once said that if a dense forest was planted in the wasteland to protect against the sandstorm, and then the land was treated for a few years, perhaps the southern Exian Empire would have a large territory. But this plan was just an idea. The real thing that stopped humans was a group of beastmen living in the south of the wasteland. They were burly and majestic, they had infinite strength, they were bloodthirsty, they were born good at fighting, they were numerous, and they ate people. The beastmen were the masters of this wasteland, the destined masters, because they were obviously more adapted to the environment here. They were more suitable than humans, and more suitable than humans. Humans always said that the fittest would survive. This adaptation could be humans adapting to the environment, and it could also be the environment adapting to humans. The scary thing was that once they adapted to the human environment, they wouldn't adapt to any other creatures except humans. The transformation of the environment by humans was the complete destruction of the original ecological environment. Destroying the living environment of other creatures just for their own living environment, just from this point alone, humans were extremely selfish. But humans never thought so. They thought that the world should belong to them after the gods left. Humans thought that they were the only masters of the world, and they thought very highly of themselves. They didn't care about anyone else. Humans said that all things were born to nurture humans, but humans had nothing to repay the heavens. Jilin felt very angry. The arrogance of humans was enough to make him angry. The meaning of this sentence was very obvious. All creatures except humans were covered in one sentence. All things were used to nurture humans. And the only thing that had a higher status than humans and wasn't included in the list of all things was the heavens. Jilin felt that it was very funny. All things were born to nurture humans, but humans had nothing to repay the heavens. You said it as if you were ashamed. If you could see it so clearly and feel so ashamed, why didn't you just die? Was this what humans often said when they used the most cowardly tone and said the most arrogant words? Humans would call the heavy casualties of humans a calamity, and ignore the extinction of other creatures. Only humans would call the extinction of humans the end of the world, but they never thought that once there were no humans in the world, the other creatures would have a much better life than they were now. All things were recovering and thriving. How could it be called the end of the world? But humans would never think of this obvious problem, because in the eyes of humans, what were those all things? They were just barbarians, beasts. If there was, there was. If there wasn't, there wasn't. It didn't matter. Jilin, who had traveled to 2 human empires, had a deep understanding of this, but Jilin, as the noblest creature, was originally high up in the sky. These things had nothing to do with him. He should be like what humans imagined, flying above the 9 heavens and coldly looking at the changes in the world below. He should be neither sad nor happy, and he shouldn't come and go. But Staya told him that humans couldn't just be a pure spectator in their life, or else they would have lived in vain. The greater the power, the greater the responsibility. This famous saying was widespread, and it wasn't without reason. Therefore, a real man should take the world as his own responsibility and save the people from the fire and water. He should worry about the worries of the world first, and enjoy the pleasures of the world later. If one was high up in the temple, he would worry about the people. If one was far away, he would worry about the emperor. Jilin said, "Wasn't it too miserable to live like this?" Staya also said that a saint in the Middle Empire once said, "If you can build thousands of houses, a large number of people in the world will be happy. It's enough to break your house and freeze to death." The wise man has passed away, but he left a beautiful jade in front of you, and the future generations should follow his example. Jilin said again, "You're a princess of the Saimai Empire. Why do you always talk about the Middle Empire? Don't tell me I was in a hurry and caught the wrong person." Staya said, "Human culture doesn't discriminate between countries." Jilin said, "Don't lie to me. Which one of those wise men you mentioned had a happy old age? It was all because they offended others, because they worried about the people. In the end, each of them had a miserable life. What about the people they worried about? Why didn't they help them? Why did they let the saints live in a broken thatched house with holes on all sides? The neighbor's children even picked up the thatch that was blown away by the wind on the saint's roof." Staya said, "So to be a saint, you have to not be happy with external things, and not be sad for yourself." Some saints said, "If you don't know the heat but don't feel it, aren't you a gentleman?" Some saints said, "If you care about the goodness in your heart, you won't regret it even if you die 9 times. Jilin's last sentence sounded quite magnanimous. After a lesson, Jilin still did not admit defeat. However, he had to admit that Staya was really eloquent and very persuasive when she was telling him these things, because there were so many human sages behind her, providing her with endless power. She was able to make a megalosaurus speechless. Those sages, in Jilin's eyes, were like how humans looked at the sky and all things. Those people could never be classified as human. When his house was leaking rain everywhere, he was actually thinking about breaking the world apart. Shouldn't a normal person be thinking about how to fix their house? When they were framed by their political enemies, denounced by the emperor, and suffered setbacks in their career, they didn't think about how to make a comeback. Instead, they worried about their emperor. Could such people still be considered human? If they didn't die, he really hoped to meet them for the first time. Jilin felt sorry for the death of humans. After a long period of brainwashing by Staya using the human sages, Jilin decided to do something. Jilin felt that the humans were going overboard and decided to teach them a lesson. Staya had said that going too far was as bad as not going far enough. The humans' territory was too big now, and the other races were still dissatisfied. If this continued, it would definitely be a path to disaster. Jilin felt that the humans giving up half of their territory was just right, taking the world as their responsibility and saving the world from disaster. The dwarves were also part of the world, and the orcs were also part of the world. Thus, there were 2 figures wearing the same kind of cloak as Mu Xin as they traveled through the sandstorm. The sandstorm lifted the hat of one of them because he didn't walk with his head lowered like the others. Instead, he walked forward with his back straight. The sandstorm took the opportunity to hit his face. If it was a normal person, their cheeks would have hurt. If they were unlucky, they might even be injured. However, this person didn't feel it at all. It was as if the sandstorm was no different from the spring breeze, because he had red hair and a pair of golden eyes. Chapter 89. The Dwarf King saw that Jilin's hat had been blown off by the wind, but he did not remind him. He just pulled his own hat lower. What a joke! He was a megalosaurus. What was this wind and sand to him? He must have been hit by stones. Jilin must have been inadvertently struck by lightning when he was flying in the sky. The Dwarf King thought mischievously. This journey was also very novel for the Dwarf King. Although he was also a 9th-rank diamond ranker, he had never walked such a long way or done such a big thing with only one person accompanying him. Now that so many dwarves had been moved into the Red Dragon Palace, the original scale was somewhat insufficient. The dwarves could only do their best to build an underground kingdom. Everyone was very busy. In the entire dwarf kingdom, the Dwarf King was probably the only one who had nothing to do. He really could not spare anyone to accompany the Dwarf King and visit the orc tribe so far away. Moreover, with such an unreasonable existence like Jilin traveling with the Dwarf King, all the dwarves were very relieved. The dwarves even thought that with Jilin by his side, the Dwarf King could even swagger in front of the orc leader and spit in his face. It would not be a problem even if he swaggered out. From the Red Dragon Palace in the west of the Saimai Empire to the wilderness in the south of the Nanshin Empire, the distance was longer than crossing a human empire. The mountains were high, the water was far, and the road was difficult and dangerous. However, with Qi Lin as his companion, this was not a problem. Apart from the fact that the wind in the sky was a little too strong, and the lightning that flashed from time to time was frightening. Furthermore, flying at such a high speed in the sky was not a good experience for any normal creature. Thinking of this, the Dwarf King could not help but shake his head. He pulled his robe a little tighter, and finally could not help but say, "Even if I said that all my wealth was saved, you don't have to do this, right? These 2 clothes are not worth much. Do you have to do this? Do you have to steal them? Who are you and I? You are a dignified megalosaurus, a godlike creature. It's fine if you don't hesitate to lower your status, but I am also the king of a country. If this matter is spread out, it will be a disgrace to the country." "I think you are right. If you didn't say it, I wouldn't have found out. Why would I spend money to buy things according to the rules of humans? I really don't know what it means," Jilin said and shook his head. He seemed to be annoyed by his previous behavior of spending. It was originally. He had never heard that money that went into the dragon's nest go out. This time, he might have really embarrassed the dragon race. Fortunately, there were no dragons in this world other than himself. No other dragons knew about it. Then won't you disgrace the dragon race by stealing? The Dwarf King could tell what Qi Lin was thinking at a glance and couldn't help but say, "Stealing is not a shameful thing in the dragon race," Jilin said to the Dwarf King with a serious face, when the ancestor of the dragon race, the Black Dragon King, rushed out of hell. He stole a pair of wings that the Lord of Hell, Satan, had taken himself. Since then, the Black Dragon King had 2 pairs of wings, a pair of dragon wings and a pair of wings. He flew faster than any dragon. This matter is known to all dragons in the dragon race, and the entire dragon race is proud of it. Now, as long as a dragon can pass through the barrier of hell, they will try to steal the remaining 2 pairs of wings of Satan, but no dragon has succeeded. For the first time, I feel that Satan is so pitiful. Not only does he have to fight against the divine court, but he also has to guard against the dragon race stealing his wings every day. The Dwarf King didn't know what to say. If he didn't take the wings himself, no one could steal them. Jilin shook his head and said, "Since he took them himself, it means that he didn't want them himself. So in the end, he was really annoyed by my ancestors and gave them to the dragon race. So, The dwarf king asked in confusion. So, stealing is not a shameful thing in the dragon race. Jilin repeated his words word for word. The dwarf king couldn't help but slap his forehead with his hand. Now he understood what it meant to want to cry but have no tears. How could these two things be compared? What did the Black Dragon King steal? In hell, he stole the wings of the Lord of Hell. It was not an exaggeration to call this kind of thing a feat as a mortal. He was very fascinated and excited by it. It was not surprising that the dragon race was proud of it. Look at you, stealing 2 robes from a human tailor. I feel ashamed for you, the dwarf king said in his heart. Actually, I don't want to steal, Jilin suddenly said seriously. It's just that I feel that if I don't steal, that human might die. The dwarf king was completely confused. Was this human language? Although you are not human at all, according to my understanding of the human race, if I ask directly, he probably won't give it to me. Jilin was a little uncertain. That's for sure. The dwarf king helped him confirm. There's still a 40% chance that he will hit me, Jilin said. That's too little, the dwarf king said. Then there's a 90% chance that he will die, Jilin said. Why is there still a 10% chance? The dwarf king felt that if Jilin attacked a human, that human's chance of survival would not be more than 10%, or it could be said that it was very small. It's a 90% chance of survival, Jilin said. What the hell? The dwarf king was flustered and exasperated, almost cursing out loud. However, Jilin, you said that it's not easy for him to do business. You can't let him take the risk of losing everything or even having a slim chance of survival just to buy clothes, right? It's not a good deal. The dwarf king tried to persuade him with kind words. However, I feel that what you said makes a lot of sense. Jilin scratched his red hair and said. The dwarf king regretted hearing this. He didn't mean what he said at all, since the dwarves came to the Red Dragon Palace. In addition to building the underground kingdom, they didn't give up their old profession of forging. Because of a contract with the dwarf king, Jilin, with the cooperation of Aisha and the dwarves, specially made a flame device that could adjust the temperature of the flame. The highest temperature was enough to melt any metal known to the dwarves. The bottleneck of forging that had suppressed the dwarves for thousands of years no longer existed. The ores that they didn't even dare to think about before could now be used. The designs that only existed in the imagination before could now be realized. One could imagine what kind of enthusiasm the dwarves would burst out. It was like a volcano that had been suppressed for countless years, suddenly erupting. Countless dwarven masters experimented day and night to complete their once genius ideas. This also caused the dwarves' ores that had been stored for countless years to decrease at an alarming rate. Finally, the dwarf king couldn't bear it any longer and said this to the dwarf grandmasters, hoping that they could save some ores. However, he didn't expect that this sentence would be heard by Jilin, who had a new and unique understanding of it. The dwarf king rubbed his aching eyebrows. Only then did he understand why Staya, Aisha, and Jilin were always a little careful when talking to each other. Although Jilin was powerful in the eyes of the dragons, he was still an underage child. His behavior and way of doing things had not been fixed yet. It was indeed a bit exaggerated to say that he was as pure as a piece of white paper. However, the close and complicated humans around him could easily draw a line on this piece of paper inadvertently and change the picture on this piece of paper. Staya obviously wanted to draw a blazing sun on this piece of paper, which represented all the positive thoughts of humans. However, the solar energy couldn't be drawn on this piece of paper. It was hard to say what the effect would be if she drew it on this piece of paper, and where she drew it now. Bane, a young human, indeed didn't realize this kind of thing, but he also inadvertently drew countless people on this piece of paper. Some were fearless of death, some were loyal, some were greedy and lustful, and some were treacherous. The effects were both good and bad. As for Aisha, who had spent the most time with Jilin, the color she drew on this piece of paper was the faintest trace. Although it was not obvious, the range of the color she drew on this piece of paper was the largest, and the impact was also the deepest. It was a fog that covered the whole piece of paper. It was enough to change the color of the sun, and it made people unable to see it clearly. It was very characteristic of witches. The Knights of Light's thoughts of justice, responsibility, and concern for the country and the people, through the layer of fog of witches, made Jilin come up with an idea to unite all the races and occupy half of the human world. Who is it? How dare you come to this place? A loud shout interrupted the Dwarf King's thoughts. The Dwarf King looked up and saw a creature with a wolf's head, a body of more than 2 meters, bulging muscles, wearing a yellow cloth, and holding a huge machete in his hand standing in front of him. He scanned his surroundings and realized that the two of them had been surrounded by orcs who had appeared out of nowhere. The orcs were indeed the masters of this wasteland. If they wanted to hide, it was really difficult for outsiders to find them. Looking at Jilin's expression, who was too lazy to even lift his eyelids, the Dwarf King knew that he had already found them. He just didn't think it was worth mentioning, so he didn't tell the Dwarf King, but the Dwarf King was distracted. He calculated a little in his heart, and indeed, they were almost at the front line of the orcs' tribe. How do you want to contact the orcs? The Dwarf King asked in a low voice. It's simple, Jilin said. Didn't you say that the orcs respect the strong? Find the strongest one, kill him, and then there will be stronger ones. Sooner or later, the leader of the orcs will come to me. No. The Dwarf King shook his head and said, this method is too rough. One mistake and there may be heavy casualties. These people will be your people in the future. How can this be? Let me do it. That's fine. Jilin nodded, happy to be free. Seeing that Jilin agreed, the Dwarf King took out a sword from behind his back and slowly pulled it out. The Dwarf King's sword, needless to say, was definitely a peerless sword. The sound of the sword being pulled out was like the roar of a tiger and the roar of a dragon, accompanied by wind and thunder. The blade of the sword was as smooth as a water mirror, but if one looked closely, there were thousands of layers of ripples. The leader of the werewolves howled and charged forward. Although he didn't know why the dwarves and humans suddenly appeared in his territory, there was nothing to say since the other party had already pulled out his sword. The rest of the werewolves also attacked from different directions. Wolves had always been pack animals. Chapter 90. The average height of the werewolves was more than 2 meters, and the leader was more than 2.5 meters. The height of the dwarves was generally only about 1 meter, and the Dwarf King was no exception. He was only a little more than 1 meter tall. The difference in size between the two would bring a strong visual impact to others. If one only looked at it from an alien perspective, there was no suspense in this battle. This was simply a rare strong man bullying a 7- or 8-year-old child. However, the people of the whole continent would not treat the dwarves as children. Although they were short, they were very strong. Their intelligence was not high, but they could make the best weapons in the world. Therefore, the werewolf leader did not make any mistakes of underestimating the enemy. He rushed to the front of the Dwarf King and used all his strength to slash down with the scimitar in his hand. A silver light appeared on the scimitar. It was the werewolf's signature skill, Full Moon Slash. The huge height advantage made this strike full of power, as if Mount Tai was pressing down with a thunderous force. The Dwarf King's expression did not change. He just blocked the sword in his hand above his head, waiting for the opponent to slash down. A trace of surprise flashed in the werewolf leader's eyes. This was very strange. The dwarves had a clear height disadvantage when facing any race. When other races attacked the dwarves, the first strike was definitely to slash down. Because it was best to use force, it was easiest to gain an advantage. Over the years, the dwarves also had their own countermeasures, that was, to block or dodge and then attack the opponent's lower body. This made the enemy panic, and turn the disadvantage into an advantage. At one time, it had made all races panic. The werewolf leader was naturally prepared, but when he saw that the enemy was prepared to defend and was only waiting for him to slash down, although he felt strange, this was his full blow after all, and there was no way to change it. The werewolf leader's scimitar successfully slashed down and passed through the sword in the hand of the dwarf king. The full moon slash drew out half a crescent. The werewolf leader did not even feel any obstruction, nor did he feel like he was slashing anything. Just when he was surprised, he suddenly felt his hand lighten. He looked down and saw that the scimitar in his hand was gone. When he raised his head again, he saw that the broken sword was stuck in the sand behind the dwarf king. The dwarf king smiled slightly. He raised the sword in his hand, and the tip of the sword was firmly placed on the werewolf leader's throat. He smiled and said, "Don't move." This sentence was obviously directed at the rest of the werewolves. The surrounding werewolves who were still charging immediately stopped themselves. They didn't even see what had happened. They only saw that their leader had been subdued by the dwarf. They also saw that the sword that their leader usually treasured more than his wife had been miserably broken. "That's right, why fight with a dwarf with a sword?" "I'm impressed," said the werewolf leader. His expression looked like Jilin's signature expression. "No objections?" the dwarf king asked with a smile. "If a human defeated me with such a good sword, I might not be convinced," said the werewolf leader. "But since it's a dwarf, I have nothing to say. I've lost. What do you want?" "You're a good man." The dwarf king smiled as he slowly sheathed his sword. The sound of the sword being sheathed was equally pleasing to the ear. The werewolf leader couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. On one hand, he was relieved that the sword on his neck had been taken away. On the other hand, it was because the dwarf king's sword was too good. "Why didn't you kill me?" the werewolf leader asked. "We're not here to cause trouble. We're here to do business," said the dwarf king. As soon as he heard the dwarf king's words, the werewolf leader's face lit up with joy. His whole body lay down, just to be able to look at the dwarf as an equal. His bloody mouth really cracked open to the roots of his ears, revealing a mouth full of bloody fangs. Although he looked fierce, the dwarf king could feel that the other party was slowly releasing goodwill. "Why are you so happy?" asked the dwarf king, puzzled. "Dwarf brother, do you still need me to say it? If you had said earlier that you were here to do business, I would have led my brothers to carry you into the tribe. You didn't even have to walk one more step. It's so far away. Dwarf brother can't tolerate it," the werewolf leader said loudly and exaggeratedly. "It's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy at all." The surrounding werewolves had already gathered around and echoed. Jilin looked at the wagging tails behind them. He felt that it wasn't a dozen wolves standing beside him, but a dozen dogs. Do business? The dwarf king was really confused. At the same time, he was somewhat puzzled. When did the relationship between the dwarves and the orcs become so good? As the dwarf king, he actually didn't know at all. He kept calling the other party dwarf brother. "Yes, dwarf brother, don't tease me at this time. You and I are so far apart. Brother, I don't need to tell you that you've traveled from the northernmost to the southernmost. Let's not talk about other things. Just based on this, I admire you. But brother, you can't go so far for no reason. Since you're not here to cause trouble, then you must not be doing well in that group of two-legged sheep. Can't you not come to us to make a living? Don't worry, as long as you come to our tribe, we'll definitely provide you with good food and drink. At that time, we'll definitely let you return with a full load." As the werewolf spoke, he grabbed the dwarf king's arm tightly, as if he was afraid that he would turn around and run away in the next second. "Oh, from what you said, you've done business with the dwarves?" asked the dwarf king with interest. Of course. The werewolf leader tried hard to get close to the dwarf king. The dignity of a brave werewolf warrior was thrown aside at this time. "What are you selling?" asked the dwarf king. "What else can I sell?" Dwarf brother, you're really funny. Of course, I'm selling weapons, the werewolf leader said as he handed the forging knife in his hand to the dwarf king. Brother, look, this knife was forged by a dwarf brother I invited to the tribe. When the dwarf king heard this, he took it and looked at it. His brows wrinkled. The dwarf king could see the material of this knife at a glance. It could only be described with 4 words, too horrible to look at. But from the lines, the forging technique was indeed the dwarves' technique. The dwarves were proud of their forging, and the whole world knew this. Under normal circumstances, if you asked the dwarves to forge something for you with a pile of scrap metal, they would be very polite if they didn't beat you up on the spot. What kind of difficulties and helplessness did a dwarf go through to forge a knife with this kind of thing? In the eyes of the dwarf king, the material of this knife couldn't even be called scrap metal. It could only be said to be the waste of forging swords. But when he looked at the design of this knife again, the dwarf king knew that this knife was forged by the dwarf wholeheartedly for the werewolf, and there was no reluctance at all. Although the dwarves would do their best for forging, this did not mean that they would do their best for the people who commissioned them to make swords. A mature dwarf craftsman only needed to glance at the employer's hand to know what kind of design and what size would suit the employer. On the other hand, they could also know what kind of design was most unsuitable for this person. If the dwarf did not want to forge, but it was not easy to refuse, they would forge a work that was not suitable for the employer. At first glance, there was no difference. Maybe it was just a little heavier, maybe the handle was a little longer, or maybe there was an undetectable curve. The employer also knew that this was an excellent weapon, but no matter how he used it, it would be awkward. Others would use it smoothly, but in the end they would either not use it or give it away. This was an unspoken secret of the dwarf race. The werewolf leader saw that the dwarf king was looking at his broken knife without speaking and was just thinking for a while, so he couldn't help but call out, "N." The dwarf king came back to his senses. "Brother, look at this saber. I'm sure you don't like it, but to me, this is my lifeblood. I don't even hug my wife when I sleep every night, I hug it. If it's broken, I can't. I'll get you a new one." The dwarf king understood the werewolf's meaning and smiled. "That's not necessary." The werewolf leader actually refused the dwarf king's proposal and said, "You can help me fix it." The dwarf king looked at the werewolf. How could he not understand? This werewolf really regarded this knife as his life, so he didn't want to change it even if he wanted to. "Don't worry, I'll definitely help you fix it better than the original." The dwarf king patted him on the shoulder and said in a deep voice, "Stand up, you still have to take us to your tribe." "Okay." The werewolf stood up and agreed. "Brother, wait here for a moment, I'll go back and find a car to pick you up." "No need." The dwarf king waved his hand and said, "You guys just go forward, we'll follow behind. You guys go as soon as possible, we can keep up." "That's fine, then I'll have to trouble you." The werewolf leader just thought for a moment and agreed. He was really worried about leaving these 2 people here alone. What if they disappeared after he left? So, a werewolf team escorted a dwarf and a human all the way to the west with smoke and dust. "See, I told you it was a better idea than yours. If you kill them all, where are we going to find the orc tribe?" The dwarf king whispered to Jilin. As a rank 9 powerhouse, as long as he wanted, even if the werewolves stood face to face in front of him, they couldn't hear what he said, no matter how good their ears were. "It's okay." Jilin nodded. "But isn't it too troublesome? Looking at them, it seems that you have to forge some weapons for them. What are you doing?" "Let's wait and see," the dwarf king said. At this moment, he remembered the werewolf's words about the dwarf who came from thousands of miles away, put down the pride of the dwarven craftsman, and used waste materials to forge scimitars for the orcs. What could make the dwarf craftsmen give up their pride? The dwarf king was very curious. Chapter 91. Capital, Starry Lake Courtyard. Jilin was sitting on a chair with one hand on the table. His index finger was tapping on the table at a very fast frequency, and the whole room was echoing with this dong 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 sound. This was a new movement that Jilin had learned, and he found it very interesting. The southern wasteland was already on the right track. For some reason, the Dwarf King was unanimously welcomed by the entire Orc tribe, and the Dwarf King was also very strangely willing to condescend and personally forge weapons for those orcs. Everything was very good. In this way, his plan in the southern wasteland would have a very smooth progress. He believed that soon, he would be able to see the supreme leader of the orcs, the Beast King. As long as he could cooperate with the orcs, he would have countless warriors under his command. Moreover, they would be the best warriors, the kind that was countless times better than him. Then, on the side of the Middle Empire, he would obtain the god's soul and turn the giant sword in his hand into an artifact. Then, he would be able to smoothly destroy the natural barrier between the volcano and the wilderness. Now, he was still in his infancy. If he wanted to destroy the barrier by himself, he was afraid that he would have to wait for 2,000 years. And judging from the current situation, the humans should not give him such a long time to sleep peacefully. When he was in the Snow Wind Empire, he didn't do anything. Didn't he just snatch a princess? This group of humans actually found so many people to beat him up. They were really making a fuss over nothing. He didn't do anything to Stya. Besides which, Megalosaurus didn't snatch a princess. After opening the barrier, he could use the excellent equipment made by the dwarves to equip the orc army that was good at fighting. After the orc army made up for their only shortcoming, they would no longer be at a disadvantage when facing the humans. They should be able to easily deal with the most troublesome human wave tactic. And with the support of the dwarves, the Red Dragon Palace would not fall behind in terms of equipment. This way, he would be able to mobilize his army to attack the humans' territory. Just thinking about it was very interesting. It would prevent the humans from gathering a large group of people to attack him. Who knows, maybe a brave warrior would appear and turn the tide. That would be very interesting. Jilin finally stopped his index finger and nodded with satisfaction. Once again, he thought about his plan and felt that it was really flawless. There was nothing to say. However, the problem was that the Middle Empire gave Jilin the feeling of a dragon devouring the moon, and he didn't know where to start. The situation in the Middle Empire was too complicated, and there was no clue at all. It couldn't be compared to the Beastmen tribes in the southern wasteland, where you could see everything clearly at a glance. Over there, as long as you could give them good weapons, they would welcome you with open arms. But in the Central Empire, you can't get anything done without going around in circles at least 3 times. This was what Bane described to Jilin. After 2 days of shopping in the capital, Bane went crazy and said that he had never seen such a group of people. They didn't do anything serious every day and only talk nonsense. They couldn't get to the point even after talking for half a day. Yet everyone here seemed to be enjoying themselves. How unreasonable. Stya said that this was the etiquette that the Middle Empire was proud of. They stood on this word and looked down on the other human empires. They used some complicated actions and ways of speaking to distinguish themselves from others. It seemed that the princess of the Saimai Empire didn't like the Middle Empire's attitude of being the boss all day long. Jilin said that it was really ridiculous. Only Aisha smiled and didn't say anything. As an extreme realist, Aisha believed in one principle, and that was that what existed was reasonable. The Middle Empire had followed this principle for thousands of years and hadn't been replaced. Naturally, it had its reasons. Aisha had lived in the Middle Empire for a period of time. She deeply understood the benefits, importance, and meaning of etiquette. However, she was too lazy to talk to this group of people. This problem couldn't be explained in a few words. Jilin wanted to go out for a walk and see the city, but he couldn't stand the suffocating huge crowd during the day. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself and ruin his genius plan. He didn't know why, but ever since Jilin came to this city, he wanted to set it on fire. In his imagination, the scene of the whole city burning made his heart throb. Therefore, Jilin decided to go out in the dead of night. However, the people in the capital didn't go to work at sunrise and rest at sunset. At night, the people on Vermilion Bird Avenue were more lively than during the day. When Jilin felt that it was time to go out, it was already after midnight. Jilin walked alone on the bright street illuminated by the moonlight while thinking about how to get in touch with the third prince. Aisha's suggestions were either too slow or too expensive. Jilin didn't think it was very good. His suggestion of letting Staya get close to the third prince was also firmly rejected. It was better to let Staya and Aisha dress up as robbers and kidnap the third prince. Then, he would see what was wrong. Jilin seriously pondered about his unspeakable plan. Unconsciously, he walked to the front of Chun Fong Lu looking up. Jilin had a feeling that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. The whole capital was resting and there was no sound. Only the street where Chun Fong Lu was located was still bustling with people. Everywhere there were lanterns and colored banners, and it was very lively. Occasionally there were pedestrians on the street, but most of them were swaying and staggering. Their faces were flushed, and their mouths were constantly muttering something that even Jilin couldn't understand. However, there were so many people, and there would always be some special people. This was the truth that Jilin knew from the beginning. Therefore, not only were there people who drank too much and didn't know anything, but only wandered on the street. There were also people who came out of a brothel and went into another one. These people usually shouted loudly, "Go this way, go that way, and drink golden wine and write poems." There were also people who spent all their money and refused to leave. They were thrown out by the brothel's thugs in front of the brothel. Even though their faces were bruised and swollen, they didn't feel ashamed. They patted the dirt off their faces, stood up, and laughed to the sky. One must enjoy life to the fullest, and money will come back after it has been spent. Huame, when I succeed and become famous, I will definitely come to find you. On the second floor of the brothel, a beautiful woman stretched her head out. Presumably, she was the Huame that the man spoke of. She bowed to the man downstairs and said with a smile, "Young master is really sincere. I only hope that young master can fulfill his wish as soon as possible. When the time comes, I will be with young master forever. Please don't make me wait." Hearing this, the man laughed 3 times, turned around, and left. He looked indescribably confident. The onlookers who saw this secretly nodded their heads, completely forgetting that this guy was thrown out by someone. Moreover, according to Jilin's guess, the person who asked the thugs to throw this guy out was most likely this Huame. When he saw the woman greet the next guest with a smile, Jilin felt that his guess was not far from the truth. Hypocritical humans. Another group of men came out of the brothel. One of them was already so drunk that he needed 2 or 3 friends to support him before he could walk forward. However, he still gripped the wine glass in his hand tightly and didn't let go. His persistent attitude was admirable. This group of people struggled to support their companions until they walked in front of Jilin. One of the men who was supporting someone saw that Jilin was standing in the middle of the road like a pillar. He didn't even know how to move aside. Just as he was about to open his mouth to say something, the drunk man beat him to it. He raised his head strenuously and glanced at Jilin. Seeing that Jilin didn't look very old, he immediately sneered and said, "What is this young man doing standing here? Did you come out behind your family's back? Are you embarrassed? Ha ha, come. This old man has nothing on him now. The only valuable thing is the golden cup in my hand. Take it. The man stuffed the wine glass in his hand into Jilin's hand as he spoke. Jilin originally wanted to throw the glass at the drunkard's face and get rid of this bastard on behalf of the human race. However, as soon as the glass entered his hand, Jilin realized that it indeed seemed to be made of pure gold. Thus, for the first time in his life, he made way for a human. Every minute of the spring night is worth 1,000 gold. Don't let the empty wine glass face the moon. Young man, go quickly. Don't waste this great time and moonlight." The drunkard continued to shout. The companions supporting him couldn't help but shake their heads when they saw that Lord Ouyang was so drunk that he gave away his favorite golden cup. However, they didn't stop him. On a windy and moonlit night, when one returned home after enjoying himself to the fullest, he met a young man in front of a brothel and gave him a golden cup as payment for the wine. Among the scholars of the Central Empire, this could definitely be considered a romantic tale of a famous scholar. They just hoped that when Lord Ouyang woke up tomorrow, he wouldn't regret it and feel sorry for him. Jilin looked at the golden cup in his hand. He suddenly didn't have the urge to burn down this city. This was the first time he felt that humans were so easily swayed by their emotions. Every single one of them, who was busy with daily necessities or buried in documents, only needed to drink a few cups in a brothel and they would all become immortals of poetry. They drank until they were unconscious and still held on tightly to the wine glass. Just like that, they casually gave it to an unfamiliar young man on the side of the road. Humans, their mentality could change completely in an instant. Jilin glanced at the demons dancing wildly on the street. He couldn't help but say in his heart, "You're all drunk if you know, but those who don't would think that you're all of the Li family's bloodline." Jilin chuckled. He felt that the existence of humans in this world added a bit of brilliance. It only added to the other creatures' frustrations. Jilin weighed the golden cup in his hand. He didn't put it away. He just held it up and walked forward slowly. A young man holding an incomparably gorgeous golden wine glass and walking on this flower street, as if there was no one around him, would always attract a few extra glances. A waiter at the door saw Jilin walking towards his shop with a dazzling golden wine glass from afar. He rolled his eyes and became mischievous. He turned around and walked into the shop. He took out a jug of wine and walked to Jilin's side. He filled the golden cup to the brim. Jilin didn't stop walking. He allowed the waiter to pour wine into the cup. He smiled at the waiter and raised his head to drink the wine in the cup. The waiter followed Jilin. When Jilin drank a cup, he would pour another cup. When he poured another cup, Jilin would drink another cup, until he finished the wine in the waiter's hand. Jilin's footsteps didn't stop. He didn't even change his pace. A young master from a wealthy family inadvertently saw this strange scene on the second floor. He thought it was a sensationalist and smiled disdainfully. He said to the waiter beside him, "Bring down a jug of double-steamed wine." "Yes." The waiter beside him grinned. He thought to himself that this wasn't a good way to become famous in the capital, because the wine on this street could drown people alive. The waiter took a jug of wine and walked to Jilin's side. He asked softly, "Brother, this is the strongest double-steamed wine. Can you drink it? If you can't, then quickly go home. You are too eye-catching on this street." When Jilin heard the word double-steamed wine, his eyes almost turned golden. He looked at the waiter in a friendly manner. The waiter understood when he saw Jilin's eyes. He could only sigh. This young man didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He raised the jug above his head and walked around. He said loudly to the surrounding people, "Young Master Wang Jiayong invites this young master to double-steamed wine." He was telling the crowd who invited Jilin to drink what wine. The waiter looked at Jilin with admiration as he drank one cup after another. Only today did he know what it meant to not refuse anyone. He drank the wine when it was served. After the waiter finished pouring the wine, another waiter immediately took over the jug. Just like the waiter, he showed the wine to the crowd and said loudly, "Young Master Zhao Jie invites this young master to a jug of pear blossom wine." Since Jilin's double-steamed wine was halfway through, there were many onlookers. After the manservant finished shouting, there was a burst of cheers. Another world-famous characteristic of the Middle Empire was that they didn't mind watching a show. The waiter returned to Wang Yong's side. Wang Yong immediately said, "Finished drinking?" "Yes." "Bring down another jug." Young Master Zhao has finished." "Then prepare a jug and wait." Okay. Just as he finished speaking, someone shouted from outside, Bright Moon Hotel's top courtesan, Miss Gongsun invites this young master to a jug of green wine. Wang Yong glared angrily. The waiter quickly went to prepare. Starting from Jilin's fifth jug of wine, every time he drank a cup, the entire street would be filled with the word good. The entire red light district was watching. This was much more interesting than drinking alone and hugging a girl. Young master, this guy is indeed extraordinary, Zhao Qi said as he looked at the young man who was drinking without stopping. Yes. Amazing. It was not in vain for me to wake up in the middle of the night to see him. Third young master nodded his head repeatedly and tapped his palm with his fan. His joy was evident in his words. Drinking 300 cups in one go, I've seen it for myself today. You can actually kill one person in 10 steps with just a drink. You've got the feeling of not being able to travel 1,000 miles. Young master, you don't say. Now that you mention it, this kid really does look like something, Zhao Qi said. That's right. No matter who it is, as long as they seriously read the great works of the immortal poet, it's inevitable that they will be affected by some unrestrained feeling. Above all, only wine can stimulate this unrestrained feeling. The third prince sighed. Even after 1,000 years, he can still make people feel as if they are his face. The old ancestor's spirit is fascinating. Zhao Qi heard this and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. The immortal poet Li and the Li of the Middle Empire's royal family were not the same Li. Only the royal family of the Middle Empire firmly believed in it. Let's liven things up. Bring a jug of wine down, the third prince said in high spirits. Okay. Zhao Qi agreed and turned to leave. He had already expected this development and had already ordered someone to prepare the wine. The waiter beside Jilin suggested that Jilin directly change to a jug. Otherwise, it would be bad if he drank and tired the people who were watching the fun. However, Jilin refused. He liked this cup very much. It seemed that he couldn't do what he wanted to do today. How could he get close to the third prince like this? Moreover, the jug of wine seemed to be given by this guy? Forget it. Jilin shook his head and thought. Thus, Jilin walked back and forth on this red light district 3 times. Until the east was bright. Chapter 92. The next day in the capital. In a roadside restaurant that sold breakfast. Aya, so it's Brother Su. Long time no see. I missed you so much. Come sit over here. Oh, it's Brother Wang. How have you been? I'm doing fine. How is Brother Wang? I haven't seen you in the red light district recently. Could it be that your wife is still so strict with you? Sigh. Don't mention it. Speaking of the red light district, I heard that a slut appeared in the red light district yesterday. I wonder if the rumors are true? I was just about to tell Brother Wang about this. I was in the red light district last night. I saw it with my own eyes. Tell me. In the golden hall of the imperial palace. Lord Ouyang tucked his hands into the sleeves of his official robe. He lowered his head and pondered without saying a word. Although it was already late April, it was still slightly cold. Although the spring breeze was chilly, it didn't manage to wake Lord Ouyang from his drunkenness yesterday. Instead, it made Lord Ouyang's head hurt even more. How much did I drink yesterday? How could I give away the golden cup? Official Ouyang was secretly distressed. There was no way he could tell others about this. Since he had already given it away, it was useless even if he was reluctant to part with it. Since that was the case, he could only pretend to be carefree and open-minded. He couldn't lose the cup again and let others look down on him. Lord Ouyang, congratulations! Just as Lord Ouyang was comforting himself, a voice sounded from the side. Lord Ouyang turned his head to look. A man in red official robes who didn't seem to be more than 30 years old was cupping his hands and talking to him. He was one of the people who sent him home yesterday. Lord Yang, may I ask what this old man is so happy about getting drunk? Lord Ouyang spoke in a muffled voice. It was obvious that the fire in his heart hadn't been suppressed. "Does Lord Yang not know?" Lord Yang asked curiously. "Right now, the entire capital is saying that the Lord Ouyang gave a sword to a hero. It's a story that will last for eternity." Lord Ouyang's interest was piqued. "Tell me." Such conversations rang out in the capital from time to time. In less than half a day, everyone in the capital knew that a legendary figure had appeared in the red light district yesterday. Yesterday, Jilin had walked around the red light district 3 times. When he saw that the sun was about to rise, he returned to the Starry Tiger courtyard. Aisha and the other 2 didn't go out, so they didn't know that Jilin had become famous again. Therefore, the 4 of them discussed how to integrate into the Middle Empire and how to get in touch with the Qiankuan formation. According to Aisha, the Qiankuan formation might be related to the Middle Empire's Imperial Jade Seal. Aisha said that since the Great Qiankuan formation was already confirmed to be underground, why don't we just dig down directly? Once we come into contact with the formation, we will naturally have a clue. Aisha was very confident in formations. Staya disagreed. She felt that once the Qiankuan Grand Array came into contact with it, something would happen. No matter what, it was too risky to just dig down rashly. Moreover, she thought that the Witch's magic formation and the Middle Empire's formation were not the same thing. She had never heard of the Witch's magic formation having something like a formation eye. Aisha said that as long as it was a formation, there was nothing that she couldn't understand. They were all formations, so they should be similar. Staya strongly disagreed, but Aisha stubbornly insisted. Until Bane suggested that they should secretly steal the Imperial Jade Seal, this meaningless discussion finally came to an end. Everyone shook their heads and left. Even Jilin, who saw humans as ants, thought that instead of stealing the Imperial Jade Seal from the palace, it would be better for him to directly blow up the capital and then search through the ruins bit by bit. It would save him a lot of trouble. Stealing the Imperial Jade Seal from the Imperial Palace would be as difficult as destroying the entire country. Seeing that there was no clue about this matter, Jilin decided to go out for a walk. Yesterday, someone gave him a golden cup when he went out for a walk. Everyone on the street invited him to drink. Who knew what surprises he would encounter when he went out for a walk yesterday, he went to the red light district, so today, Jilin went to the street behind the red light district. Compared to the extremely luxurious red light district, which was filled with tall buildings and dim lights, this street was much more ordinary and plain. Most of the streets were just some small merchants and peddlers hawking their wares on the street. Everyone seemed very busy. Therefore, no one had the time to give Jilin gifts or invite Jilin to drink, so Jilin was a little disappointed. Jilin casually walked on the street and at the same time, he felt the surge of energy underground. Every road in the capital was a line of the underground formation. Jilin used his intuition and strolled for a while. Suddenly he felt something. Jilin raised his head and saw that it was a shop that sold cloth. It looked very ordinary and mediocre. Jilin looked around and realized why he felt something was strange. Because there were always people wandering around this cloth shop. They didn't stop, but they didn't leave. They only stared at this cloth shop. They did it very covertly, but they couldn't escape Jilin's fiery golden eyes. Jilin stood in the same place for a while and realized something even stranger. These people didn't seem to have any bad intentions. When they saw that the shop had no business for a long time, someone would come out and buy 2 bolts of cloth and leave. He carried the 2 bolts of cloth and left. Not long after, another person would take his place. Jilin looked at this strange scene, but he didn't notice. No, he didn't care that the passers-by were also looking at him. A youth standing at the entrance of the cloth shop, looking at the crowd without moving for 6 to 8 hours, was also very eye-catching. "Young master, you've been here for a long time." The owner of the cloth shop was a young and delicate lady. According to human terms, she could be considered a beauty. When she saw Jilin standing at the entrance of her shop for so long, she couldn't help but come out and say this. What she meant was that if you came to buy something, you should buy it quickly. If you didn't, you should leave quickly. Don't disturb other people's business. Jilin obviously couldn't hear the hidden meaning of the human's words. Hearing this human say this, he felt that a few hours had passed. However, this was normal. As a member of the dragon race, Jilin could sleep for tens of years. He really couldn't be expected to have a sense of time. A few hours to Jilin was really just a snap of the fingers. Perhaps it was just a moment of absent-mindedness. Jilin saw that there was nothing wrong, so he shook his head and continued to walk forward. He didn't speak to the lady boss. Stop. Jilin had only taken a few steps when he heard someone speak. However, Jilin didn't think that this person was talking to him until the person was in front of him, blocking his way. It's you, Jilin said as he raised his head. Why do you always talk with your head raised? Zhao Qi asked somewhat angrily. He had been in the capital for so many years, what kind of people had he not seen? However, it was the first time he saw someone who looked at people with their nostrils like this. Normally, 7th grandfather Zhao would have already beaten that person to the ground and groaned. I'm used to it. Jilin still raised his head and looked down. You. The veins on Zhao Qi's forehead bulged. You've been standing in front of that cloth shop for a long time. I'm just looking around, Jilin said. The third prince asked me to come over and invite you. Jilin thought that he had finally reached the main point. If it wasn't for this sentence, who would have the patience to say these words to you? Zhao Qi had never seen such an arrogant person. The third prince was still waiting for Jilin on the 3rd floor of Spring Breeze House. As soon as Jilin and Zhao Qi entered the door, the third prince greeted them and said with great enthusiasm, Brother, we are honored by your presence. Your presence brings light to my humble dwelling. The third prince. Jilin stared at the third prince and said without beating around the bush. The temperature of the entire space seemed to have dropped with Jilin's words. Zhao Qi's face was so gloomy that it could drip water. Now that the third prince was too close to Jilin, he couldn't make things difficult for him. However, the third prince didn't care at all. He smiled and said, Brother, this is the first time you came to the capital. In such a short time, you have gained such a big reputation. Drinking at night on the red light street, 3 turns without getting drunk. This has spread throughout the capital. Brother's charisma is fascinating. Now, in just a few days, you have found out the ins and outs of this one. You really aren't an ordinary person. The third prince wasn't surprised that Jilin knew his identity. This was something that everyone in the capital knew. Why are you looking for me? Jilin ignored the third prince and asked directly. I don't know brother's name? The third prince saw that Jilin was chatting like this and wasn't afraid. At worst, they could just talk about their own things. My surname is Long. Jilin thought for a moment and said. This surname is very rare. The third prince said with gritted teeth. Even someone as gentle as him couldn't help but get angry. Jilin's appearance was obviously made up on the spot. He even made it up so ridiculously. Their royal family claimed to be of the dragon bloodline. In the end, this person said that his surname was Long. It's okay. Jilin was very proud of his wit. That's good, Brother Long. The third prince gritted his teeth and swallowed his anger. He didn't intend to ask for the name anymore since it was made up on the spot. Dare I ask, Brother Long, why did you stand in front of that small cloth store for 4 to 5 hours? You even care about this? Jilin said playfully. Why would a prince of such a big empire care so much about a small store? Even I don't think it makes sense. This one is no longer a prince. Don't tell me Brother Long doesn't know? The third prince said. No, I don't want to hide it from Brother Long. The reason why this one stays in Chun Feng restaurant every day is because of this cloth store. The third prince said as he led Jilin to a window. Jilin poked his head out and looked down. What he saw was the cloth store just now. Looking down at the cloth store from this window, the location was really a match made in heaven. Other than the innermost shadow of the cloth store, the rest of the place could be seen at a glance. What about those people around? Jilin asked. Brother Long is really good. This one thought that these people were very hidden, but I didn't expect Brother Long to find them. The third prince said with a smile. That's right, those are my people. Chapter 93. Hee. Jilin looked at the third prince and shook his head. His eyes were obviously looking at trash. The third young master had never been looked at like this in his entire life. For a moment, he didn't quite understand what Jilin meant. However, he also felt that something wasn't quite right. Puzzled, he asked, Brother Long, what's wrong? Why are you looking at me like this? It's nothing. Jilin waved his hand. I just didn't expect you to play peeping. What's wrong? You're afraid that he'll run away, so you sent someone to watch him. You're quite considerate. It really refreshed my bottom line of humans. Jilin nodded repeatedly as he spoke. He used to hear his father say how dirty and despicable humans were, but he didn't know why he didn't have a direct understanding of it. Today, he finally opened his eyes. The third prince never thought that one day, someone would actually say such things to him. His white face suddenly turned into the color of a pig's liver. Clang! The sound of a sword being unsheathed was heard. Zhao Qi couldn't bear it anymore. As a subject, he had to die when the monarch was humiliated. As a friend, he had to sacrifice himself. No matter which side he was on, he couldn't let seventh grandfather Zhao remain silent. The sword light was like a rainbow, lonely and cold. It had the intention of dashing forward without regard for one's safety. It was unusually fierce. Zhao Qi knew that the opponent's strength was extraordinary, so this sword was full of strength. For seventh grandfather Zhao to be able to emerge from the bottom of the big capital, his own strength was certainly extraordinary. The sword was like lightning. Before the third prince could say anything to stop it, the sword had already stabbed behind Jilin. The third prince couldn't see Zhao Qi's sword at all, although he stabbed straight like a sword. However, Jilin was able to calmly turn around, raise his hand, stretch out his fingers, and pinch the tip of Zhao Qi's sword with his thumb and index finger. Wonderful to the max. Zhao Qi wanted to use his sword to cut off Jilin's fingers. Only then did he realize that no matter how much strength he exerted, he could not make his sword, which could cut through iron like mud, move even a little bit. Stop! The third prince had been shouting since the moment Zhao Qi pulled out his sword. He only shouted now. The shout was too late to stop Zhao Qi's sword, but it was not in vain. Jilin's fingertips that were about to plunge into Zhao Qi's chest stopped abruptly. Jilin quietly looked at the third prince. In the end, he sneered and let go of Zhao Qi's sword. His right fingernail was stained with some blood. What? Are you trying to silence me? Jilin laughed. Brother Long, what are you talking about? We were too impulsive. The third prince cupped his hands and apologized to Jilin. Zhao Qi's eyes were red, but he still maintained his original position and did not move. Old Seven, go and rest first. Treat your injuries. The third prince patted Zhao Qi's shoulder and said, I believe that Brother Long will not harm me. Young master. Zhao Qi naturally did not agree. Let's go. If Brother Long really had ill intentions towards us, I'm afraid he would not have come over as soon as you invited him. Moreover, if Brother Long really wanted to touch me, it seems that you would not be able to stop him. The third prince said. This. Zhao Qi turned and walked out of the room. However, when he left, it was obvious that he was very depressed. The third prince did not panic in the face of danger, and was not afraid of danger. Very extraordinary. Jilin said, however, compared to the rumors, there seems to be a big difference. Hee, Brother Long, it is better if you don't call me the third prince. I have already fallen out with the royal family. You should call me the third prince or Li Yu. The third prince said with a smile, I just don't know what the rumors say about me. Okay, the third prince. Jilin agreed. The third prince kept calling him Brother Long, which made him very satisfied. The rumors say that the third prince indulges in debauchery every day, leading a drunken life. He is so absurd that when a brothel opens during the day, he stays there all night without restraint, not knowing how long it has been. He is a character like mud, despised by people. Ha ha! The third prince laughed maniacally. What's so funny? Jilin asked. All the women are jealous of me. The rumors say that I indulge in debauchery. People are jealous of me. How can I not laugh? How can I not be proud of myself? The third prince said. They seem to be scolding you. Jilin was a little puzzled. He wondered if the person in front of him was stupid. No, because they are scolding me, it proves that they are jealous of me. The third prince said stubbornly. Why? Jilin asked. Because I am living a life that they want to live but do not dare to. The third prince said. Then are you comfortable? Jilin asked. And? The third prince was stunned. Brother Long, why do you say that? A pot of wine in a flower is enough to comfort the mortal world. Naturally, it is very comfortable. I don't think so. Jilin laughed. A person who peeps all day shouldn't be able to say something like that. The third prince stopped pretending. Oh! The third prince smiled but did not say anything. According to my observation yesterday, I found that under normal circumstances, human males would not look out the window when they are in a brothel. Jilin said. The third prince did not say anything, because this was a useless sentence. Who would look out the window when they were in a brothel? No matter how beautiful the scenery outside was, what was the point of coming here? The most beautiful scenery in the world was right next to them. When the golden wind and the jade dew meet, it would surpass countless people in the world. Had he never heard of this before? But you are different. Jilin saw that the third prince did not say anything, so he continued. You are sitting in this brothel for the sole purpose of looking out the window. More accurately, it is to look at the cloth store. After Jilin finished speaking, he pointed at the cloth store downstairs. He could still see the beautiful lady boss sending the customers out. With Jilin's hearing, he could still hear the lady boss gently calling out to the customers, walk slowly. I have been guarding this cloth store for 5 or 6 years. In order to confuse the public, I did not hesitate to sully myself. I thought it was flawless, but who would have thought that Brother Long, who has only been in the capital for a few days, would see through it? I am truly ashamed. The third prince said. What do you want? The third prince changed the topic. His tone was very stiff, but it was a matter of course. Nothing. Jilin said. That would be best. The third prince said with a sigh of relief. But I don't care what you want to do in the capital. I hope that you can stay away from her. That way, everyone will have less trouble. Brother Long, what do you think? Who is that person? Jilin asked. No matter what, you are still a prince. Why are you so fixated on that person? Why are you letting someone watch over her? I only stood there for a short while, and you already knew. That is protection. And that was not for a short while, it was for 6 to 8 hours. When I saw you standing there without moving, I thought that you had evil intentions. The third prince used his hand to hit his thigh and said angrily. Just how much did this person think of him? No matter what, he was still known as the number 1 person in the capital who cherished women. How preposterous! Okay. Jilin waved his hand, half-heartedly indicating that he already knew that the third prince did not have any evil intentions towards the lady boss. Then quickly tell me, who is that person? You. The third prince angrily glared at Jilin, then lowered his head dejectedly. You have to promise me that you will not tell anyone else. Okay. Jilin repeatedly nodded. I am the most trustworthy. If the third prince was like Aisha and had seen Jilin's speech about the human oath on the mobile city, he would not have easily believed Jilin's words and said the following. This matter has been hidden in my heart for a long time. Only Zhao Qi knows the ins and outs of the matter. Now that you have found out, it is good to tell you. That woman is called Xueqing. She is a maid who has served me since I was young. The third prince said, Is a maid worth your attention? Jilin did not believe it. He sat at the table, picked up an apple from the plate, took a bite, and asked. She is naturally different. When the third prince said this, even Jilin could see the infinite tenderness in his eyes. No, can you be more serious? Do you think I am telling you a story? Don't interrupt. The third prince expressed his serious dissatisfaction with Jilin's sloppy attitude. Okay. Go ahead. Jilin said. I am the third child in the family. Although I can only see His Majesty a few times a year, I have nothing to complain about. Compared to the other brothers, I have already gained His Majesty's favor. As a prince, this is what I should do because His Majesty is really busy every day. He always stays in the Wuji Palace to deal with big and small matters. The Middle Empire is so big, there is no time for those matters to be dealt with. Therefore, His Majesty chose a playmate of the same age for every young prince to make up for his regret of not being able to personally accompany his children. My playmate is Xueqing. I see that you are very troubled by the fact that your country is too big, Jilin said. The third prince was stunned by the sudden interruption. This wasn't my main point. How about I help you shrink it by half? Jilin smiled and negotiated. No need to thank me. The third prince raised his voice by 2 whole pitches. I am joking. Go on. Jilin said repeatedly. How can this kind of joke be made so casually? Do you want to hear it or not? The third prince was flustered and exasperated as he roared at Jilin. He really didn't know what this person was thinking. How dare he say such disgraceful words in front of him, and he didn't even need to thank him. I want to hear it. Then why did you fall out with your father and come to this brothel? Jilin hurriedly changed the topic. It seemed that it was still too early to share his perfect plan with others. Sigh. The third prince sighed deeply. Life is full of hardships. A pot of wine among the flowers, to comfort the mortal world. Although there was only a difference of 1 word, it was enough. The meaning and mood were thousands of miles apart. It was as if there were thousands of layers of misty rain and thousands of mountains and rivers. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.